Chapter 1479. Hashtag, oh my god, Her Majesty's tomb has been opened. Hashtag Wei Si's face was deathly still. He clenched his teeth and stood at the entrance of the imperial mausoleum. He did not know what had happened. In the blink of an eye, the warm spring of March had turned into July. The unfamiliar environment made him tremble. When he saw the introduction in front of the imperial mausoleum, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He was angry and sad. The Jiang dynasty had a total of 13 emperors. The imperial mausoleum was called the Chun Mausoleum, and it was the only imperial mausoleum that was open to the public. Wei Si did not know what kind of mentality the descendants of the later generations had. They actually allowed the imperial mausoleum to be visited and disturb the peace of the ancestors. It was really, thinking about it, he did not know what words to use to express the grief and anger in his heart. He could only hold the ticket tightly. He was pushed through the inspection like a piece of wood and entered the first door of the imperial mausoleum. Although it was an imperial mausoleum, the layout did not feel gloomy, but it was not extravagant either. Instead, it looked spacious and simple. There was a long stone corridor leading to the imperial mausoleum. The two walls were carved with the great and small deeds of the great ancestor from her youth to her old age. Passing through the stone corridor seemed to be looking at her life. As one of the famous tourist attractions in the country, the imperial mausoleum had a limit on the number of tourists it could receive every day. The tickets were often in short supply. Wei Si followed the crowd for about 100 meters and saw several tour groups. The tour guides were introducing the historical deeds represented by the murals to the tourists. Wei Si pursed his lips and staggered forward. His pale face made him look like a ghost in the imperial mausoleum. He heard one of the tour guides say, "The mural we are looking at now is the famous great ancestor's admonition. It warned the young emperor of the time not to hold a grand funeral. All the funerary objects should be replaced with ordinary clay. No living people, jade, gold, silver, copper, iron, and the like should be buried with them." This also became a custom passed down by the Jiang dynasty emperors. According to historical records, the most extravagant emperor in the history of the Jiang dynasty was Jiang Renzong. The funerary objects were only 2 more pure gold medals than his ancestors. This also made the funerary customs of the Jiang dynasty extremely simple. At the same time, the imperial mausoleum of this period was also the last target of the tomb raiders because there was no profit at all. The imperial mausoleum could be considered poor, but the area was not small. It was divided into 5 parts. The stone corridor recorded the events of the emperor's life, the main tomb where the emperor's coffin was buried, the abode where the emperor's calligraphy was buried, the official hall where the statues of the emperor's ministers were placed, and finally, the outer hall where the statues of thousands of soldiers were placed. According to historical records, except for the current empress, the tombs of the previous 12 emperors were exactly the same. Opening the Chun Mausoleum was equivalent to looking at the tombs of the other 11 emperors. Wei Si followed the crowd and walked through the stone corridor. There were many people, but fortunately, his body was tall enough to stand out from the crowd. He endured the redness in his eyes as he stood in a corner at the end of the stone corridor, slowly calming down. At this moment, he heard a young female voice speak out the voice in his heart. A great humiliation. Although the imperial family had handed over their authority and become a constitutional monarch, they were not completely dead. They were actually forced to open their ancestors' mausoleum. Wei Si tilted his head and looked at the source of the voice. He saw a 6 or 7-year-old girl with a straight face and slightly red eyes. "Do you think it's a humiliation too?" Wei Si asked her. The girl said, "Isn't it?" Wei Si saw that the girl looked kind and even had the urge to get close to her. "There are too many people here. Shall I take you somewhere else to wait for your family to come?" There were too many kidnappers. This girl was so pretty, so she might be unlucky. The girl glanced at him, pursed her lips, and held out her hand. Wei Si held her hand and walked forward. He asked casually, "Why did you say it's a great humiliation just now?" The girl said coldly, "Nearly 100 years ago, the power of the people rose and encouraged the people to force the imperial family to reform. The imperial family's influence gradually weakened. The empress of that generation made a decision and took the initiative to sign a constitutional monarch treaty. However, the imperial family is still the imperial family. There are always people who are worried that the empress will return, so they repeatedly tested the bottom line. The imperial family had already delegated power. Besides a small amount of military power, they basically had no other alliance. They had no choice but to compromise. More than 20 years ago, the mausoleum of Emperor Chun collapsed. The outside world wanted to send experts to intervene in the restoration of the mausoleum under the pretext of protecting the mausoleum so that they could study the history of that period. Then, they made an unreasonable request to make it a scenic spot. Wei Ci trembled. That's too much. Then why did they delegate power and establish a constitution? Because the girl tilted her head and pondered for a while. She said sadly, "Times are always moving forward. The imperial family can't keep up with the changes. If they stubbornly seize the power of the imperial family and don't let go, they are bound to fight against the trend of the entire era. One of the two has to be sacrificed." The imperial family chose to sacrifice their own interests. On one hand, they're thinking about the stability of the entire country. On the other hand, they're also thinking about long-term survival. There was no change that didn't require blood and sacrifice, unless one side took the initiative to give in and allow the change to happen. Wei Ci felt like a fishbone was stuck in his throat. He almost didn't know how to respond. But the girl's expression suddenly became more severe. She muttered, "The imperial family giving in doesn't mean that they don't remember this feud. Delegating power doesn't mean that they will really be trampled on by others. The feud of being forced to open the mausoleum of the ancestors will be settled sooner or later." The core of this era was technology. The imperial family had never lost in this. Sooner or later, the power of capital that rose during the chaos would lose all the underwear of their ancestors. Ancestors? A trace of astonishment flashed in Wei Ci's eyes. Before he could think more, two mature women with excellent temperaments blocked their way. Crown Princess Huichang. The girl asked coldly, "Can I come to visit the ancestors during the Dragon Boat Festival?" At this moment, Wei Ci realized that the girl was holding a string of dumplings in her other hand. This girl was indeed. "Madam is angry that you ran away from home without saying anything," the girl said. "It's not the first day. She knows that I like to run away from home. At most, she will go back and punish me." The two empresses from the time of the Constitution were quite gentle and soft, at least on the surface. The girl's mother appeared to be good-tempered to outsiders, who knew how cruel she was when she was angry and hit her daughter. "I'll be back after I put the dumplings in." The main mausoleum of Emperor Chun was not open to the public unless it was a special occasion, but the descendants of the imperial family could come to worship their ancestors. Wei Ci found something strange. The two women who called the girl Crown Princess Huichang didn't see him. The girl pulled Wei Ci through the secret passage to the main mausoleum of the Imperial Mausoleum. The surroundings were empty, except for the lights near the dome. There was only one coffin in the main mausoleum of the Imperial Mausoleum, but there were two corpses buried in it. Other than the direct descendants of the imperial family, no one knew the identity of the other male corpse. Some gossip experts did all kinds of research, but unfortunately, they didn't guess correctly. The girl was baffled. The male corpse in the coffin was also her ancestor. To put it bluntly, it was her family matter. What was the point of outsiders studying it? Wei Ci saw the girl put the two dumplings on a plate and respectfully saluted her. She said, "This is the first time I've seen my ancestor's spirit. The portrait left by my ancestor is quite realistic. Otherwise, I wouldn't have recognized it." Wei Ci was speechless. This child was a bit smart. "I'm here to see her. What happens after you see her?" Chapter 1480. Even if it was a tentative attack, the troops under Niel Yang's command were not pushovers. They actually put a certain amount of pressure on Zhanjiang Pass. However, Qiguan Reng had considered this long ago. He made full use of the terrain of Zhanjiang Pass. While commanding on the city wall, he ordered the archers and soldiers who operated the crossbows to focus on attacking the weakest parts of the enemy's formation. Combined with the terrain, the speed of Niel Yang's army's advance was greatly reduced. Jiang Pengji waited at the back for a while. She could not sit still anymore. Although the messengers would send back the important information of the battlefield, it was not as good as seeing it with her own eyes. It's been almost 15 minutes. The enemy still has no intention of retreating. At present, there were not many casualties on both sides. When Niel Yang's army set up ladders and covered the battering pillars to hit the city gate, the casualties would increase dramatically. Because it would be crowded at that time, even a blind man could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. When the attacking side climbed the wall using ladders or ropes, the defending side would knock people down. According to the height of the city gate of Zhangjiang Pass, it would basically be a child falling down. If they really entered this stage, the losses of Niel Yang's army would be much greater than now. Jiang Pengji muttered, "It's just a feint. Why work so hard?" She was bored out of her mind. The salted fish in the streaming room were even more bored than her. The battle report was not exciting enough. They wanted to watch the battle at the front line. Just listening to the battle report felt like scratching an itch. It was better not to listen, but it was even more uncomfortable. Fitness Darren. Hey, why is Niel Yang working so hard this time? Streamer, don't you have any idea? If she didn't anger Niel Yang, why would he be so angry? Slimming Gazai. I now feel like a player who participated in the World Cup but sat on the bench from beginning to end. He watched his teammates gallop on the field, but he could only be moldy from idleness. Isn't the streamer a husky? Can you stand squatting at the back? Although many salted fish complained that the streaming room was too bloody and violent, there were also many salted fish who liked it. Jiang Pengji was a battle maniac who fought on the front line, but now she was sitting on the bench. Those salted fish felt bad for her. The salted fish fanned the flames. Jiang Pengji was someone who could not sit still. She immediately decided to climb up the city wall and join in. Everyone, the flames of war raged on the city walls. The enemy army had already set up ladders in an attempt to scale the walls and fight. Qiguan Rang and his companion were able to keep their composure. The enemy did not panic after setting up the ladder. They waited for them to climb 2/3 of the way up before pushing the ladder down. The ropes they threw up were treated the same way. However, the same method did not work every time. The enemies swarmed over like hornets and gathered under the city walls. The enemy archers used arrows that had been smeared with black oil to disrupt the guards on the walls. At the same time, they provided cover for the soldiers climbing the walls. Their coordination was excellent. The area of the city walls was limited, and the number of guards was naturally limited as well. If these people panicked, they would not be able to effectively push the enemy down, and the city walls would definitely fall. Qiguan Rang and Sun, one would not make such a mistake. The soldiers under Jiang Pengji's command were the most obedient. They had been brainwashed by the camp's political commissar for a few years after they entered the military camp. Even if they were all afraid of death, when the horn sounded, they would still rush forward because their bodies had already formed a reflex response to the command. Sunwon was still merciful. He ordered the soldiers in the watchtower to observe the abnormal movements of the enemy's rear defense line. He also ordered the archers to divide into 3 waves. The first wave would shoot at the enemy archers at the front line below the city walls. After shooting, they would retreat half a step and let another wave of archers fill in the gaps as much as possible. The third wave was responsible for the enemies who try to climb up the city walls. In addition, there were soldiers holding red-tasseled spears. They aimed at the enemy's eyes, cheeks, throats, and other parts and directly stabbed them down. There seemed to be many soldiers on the city walls, but the rhythm of the battle was fast and steady. Qiguan Rang's side was much more ruthless. Not only did archers and soldiers with long spears interfere with climbing the walls, but he also poured water and burned charcoal. When a basin of boiling hot water was poured down, the faces of the soldiers at the top of the ladders were basically scalded. The soldiers at the bottom were not only hit in the face by objects thrown from high up in the sky, but the unlucky ones were also splashed by hot water and charcoal. If it was not for the lack of time, Qiguan Rang wanted to embed iron caltrops on the battlements of the city walls. If the enemy dared to climb the wall, their hands and feet would be pierced and bloody. However, this proposal was rejected by his lord. The reason was simple. Iron caltrops are not made of iron. In addition to these routine operations, Qiguan Rang also hung iron planks covered with thick iron nails on the city walls. The soldiers only needed to loosen the ropes to stab the iron planks at the enemies who tried to climb the wall. When they pulled the ropes back, the corpses of the enemies, which were riddled with holes, would be knocked down the city walls. After a wave of probing, the enemies could not successfully climb the city walls. On the other hand, Nieliang carefully noted down the defensive objects used by the enemies on the city walls. The first wave of attack did not gain much of an advantage. Niejun did not give up. Instead, he ordered the soldiers to push dozens of catapults. The catapults of this era were not Jiang Pengji's original creation. They were also used on a large scale during the war. They could be considered a weapon of mass destruction in war. The giant catapults she used to attack Qingan district had been improved several times. Their overall performance, whether it was the accuracy of the fixed-point projectiles, the projectile distance, or the force of the attack, was much higher than the average standard of this era. Of course, as a big country among the 5 countries, Zhongzhao's technological level was not low. Even if the power of the catapults in front of them was not as good as the ones prepared by Jiang Pengji, they were not weak. Thinking of this, Qiguan Rang, who had originally planned to hide his trump card, had no choice but to reveal one of his trump cards. The size and transportation of the catapults were a big problem. Jiang Pengji asked Zhang Ping and the others to research other models of catapults. They gave up a certain carrying capacity in exchange for a longer throwing distance and more dexterity, further simplifying the operation. The simplified operation meant that the time from loading, throwing, and firing of the catapults was shortened. When the enemy fired one shot, their side could throw 3 times and adjust the angle of the projectile, who wouldn't hurt each other. Although the power of the catapults was great, Zhanjiang Pass was a dangerous pass. The stones used to build the city walls were huge stones used to build the Great Wall. They were huge and dense. It was difficult for ordinary heavy objects to pose a threat. Nieliang's army had obviously considered this point, so they aimed at the soldiers on the city walls. Because of the height of the city walls, the distance of the catapults could not be too far, which happened to be within the range of the ballistae on the city walls. When Zheng ordered the soldiers to aim at the joints of their catapults, Qiguan Rang's expression was solemn. Seeing the enemy deploy the catapults, he was already in a bad mood. When he heard the familiar voice, he almost choked. "My lord, it's dangerous here. Please leave immediately." Qiguan Rang was well aware of the power of the catapults. Even if his side retaliated, the casualties would not be reduced. Chapter 1481. Jiang Pengji looked helpless. She said, "Don't panic. Do you know how to be steady?" Qiguan Rang's most precious feather fan was thrown aside. If he was not rational, he would have carried her away. Whether he could win or not, that was another matter. "My lord," Jiang Pengji said, "if you have the time to persuade me, do as I say. Order people to adjust the angle of attack and aim at the joints of the enemy's catapult. As long as their catapult is destroyed, the crisis will naturally be resolved. If not, order people to use fire arrows." Most catapult carts were made of wood. It was not that it was bad to use metal, but because the smelting technology was not good, there was not much copper and iron produced. If the catapult was made of metal, it would not be easy to transport in war. The cost was high, so it was better. Because it was made of wood, the joints were either tied with mortise and tenon or thick ropes. The former was fine, but the latter was easy to loosen. If fire arrows or crossbows were used to aim at the joints, they should be able to hit the enemy's catapult. If one arrow did not work, use 2 arrows. If 2 arrows did not work, use 3 arrows. They could not be restricted and let the enemy attack freely. Qiguan Rang saw that his lord was unmoved and could only sigh. He was secretly prepared to apologize. If his lord was injured, he would be the scapegoat. Who asked him to not be able to persuade his lord? Instead, he indulged her? Yes. Qiguan Rang immediately passed down the order. While continuing to target the enemy who tried to climb the wall, some people were sent to deal with the catapult. Jiang Pengji said, "Fortunately, we are defending the city. The catapult can be covered by the wall. Otherwise, it would most likely be the same result." Qiguan Rang was speechless. To be honest, he knew about burning the catapult. If Jiang Pengji did not come, he would have done the same, but to aim at the joints, Qiguan Rang understood a little. Why did his lord like carpentry so much? It was not without its benefits. The enemy used the catapult to attack the city. Naturally, they would not carelessly leave an empty space. The catapult was also heavily protected. Jiang Pengji asked a soldier operating the crossbow to stand up and give his seat to her. Although she could not kill to her heart's content, she could also show off her archery skills. Seeing this, Qiguan Rang could only sigh and ask the soldiers to protect her to prevent her from being injured by stray arrows. The power of the ballistae was obvious to all, not to mention the fact that the ballistae they were using now were the strengthened version that had been improved several times. Not only did it have additional parts to assist in aiming, but its shooting range was also much better than the original version. The battle cries were deafening outside, but Jiang Pengji had no distractions. All she had to do was aim and fire. This version of the bed crossbow also had an enhanced continuous firing function. There was no need to stop shooting when reloading the arrows, because there were other soldiers helping to reload. For the sake of safety, the other soldiers who operated the ballistae chose to attack the base or other fixed parts of the catapult. Jiang Pengji chose to attack the lever of the catapult. Even though the lever could move, for Jiang Pengji, a fixed target and a moving target were the same. In addition, choosing the lever as a target also had its advantages. At the very least, it wouldn't be as crowded as the base. From the perspective of the salted fish, they did not even know which catapult Jiang Pengji had chosen, let alone the location of the catapult. When she shot several arrows at lightning speed, each arrow hitting the same part of the throwing lever, the salted fish could only cheer for Jiang Pengji. Meng Xin Xiao Kuai. I gracefully present this year's knee to the streamer. Please accept it. Qi Qingcheng. As a salted fish, can I ask a question in a low voice? Why are you cheering for me again? The battlefield was chaotic. Every salted fish had a different focus. The streaming room was a live broadcast, so it was impossible to replay it. Therefore, many salted fish did not know what had happened. They just followed suit and cheered for her. Anyway, it couldn't be wrong. Xinxiang warning. With my excellent dynamic vision, I can responsibly tell you how awesome the streamer's operation is. That soul imprint just now was simply too cool. At the same time that the enemy's catapult shot, the streamer shot several arrows and broke the throwing lever. The lever broke, and the catapult did not have enough strength. It fell from the sky and hit the enemy's camp. Such a huge rock could probably smash 3 or 4 people in a meat paste. Jiang Pengji pursed her lips tightly and asked someone to adjust the angle to another catapult within the shooting range. Huge rocks were thrown from above and below the city walls. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. Jiang Pengji's hand was still steady, and she did not sweat. With a series of maneuvers, she accurately destroyed 5 of the enemy's catapults. The pressure on the city walls within the range of the 5 catapults was instantly reduced. The other soldiers also had some gains. When the pressure on their side was reduced, the pressure on the enemy's soared. Niel Yang, who was supervising the battle from the rear, frowned deeply. His pale face made the green in his eyes look even more terrifying. "My lord," Niel Yang said, "I underestimated Lu Shi's ability. In less than 15 minutes, the enemy had successively destroyed the catapults within a small area. It was obvious that the enemy had a general with superb archery skills. Every one of these catapults had been broken by the enemy's attack on their weak points during the process of being launched. The battlefield was chaotic, and it took a lot of time to replace the throwing lever. It was almost equivalent to being useless. Why haven't I heard of such a person in Lu Shi's camp before? This kind of archery skill was used to defend the city and greatly limited the catapults of the attacking side. It was simply a nightmare. Niel Yang saw that no one answered inside. Forget it. It's about time for today. The number of catapults they brought to attack the city this time was not many. The enemy was so good at dismantling them. The possibility of successfully attacking the city was almost zero. Nielyang was not a stubborn person who sought victory. He clearly remembered the real purpose of today. He lowered his eyes and issued several orders. The depth of his eyes seemed to be like a bottomless abyss. Not long after, Qiguan Rang and the others also realized that the enemy's attack had slowed down. It seemed that they had the intention of retreating. After fighting for 2 hours, the total number of casualties on both sides was close to 7,000. If they continued to waste time, none of them would have an advantage. Nielyang's side was feigning an attack. They had enough people, but they did not bring enough military supplies. Their endurance was worrying. Jiang Pingji also had a few batches of supplies on the way. If they continued to carry them, they would inevitably face the predicament of not having enough supplies to defend the city. They were relieved that Nielyang had retreated. Jiang Pingji watched for a while, but she had a bad feeling in her heart. Qiguan Rang also said, Nielyang suffered such a big loss yesterday. If he retreated without a winner being decided today, wouldn't it be? Thinking of this, he felt that Nielyang still had a trick up his sleeve. That's right. At this moment, what trick could Nielyang have? Jiang Pengji stood on the city wall and looked down. She suddenly remembered something when she saw a pile of corpses piled up high. Wenjeng, your subject is here. Quickly order people to prepare water. Take preventive measures. Jiang Pengji said, I suddenly thought of Gemin Pass. Chapter 1482. Jiamen Pass. Qiguan Rang frowned. He seemed to remember something and asked in surprise, My lord, do you mean to attack with fire? Jiang Pingji pointed at the corpses piled up at the foot of the city wall. Some were dead, some were still breathing, but their injuries were too severe. They were probably struggling at death's door. She said, Although there's no dry wood nearby to help with the burning, it's not easy to put out these corpses when they burn. That was the only guess Jiang Pengji had left after thinking about it. She didn't know if she had guessed correctly, but it was better to be prepared. It was better to be more vigilant. Qiguan Rang didn't dare to delay and immediately gave the order. Although they reacted fast enough, they still couldn't keep up with the changes on the battlefield. Nielyang didn't retreat immediately. Instead, he chose to retreat while fighting. He wanted to maintain order and reduce casualties as much as possible. When two armies fought, retreat was also important. If one side was defeated and fled without a second thought, it was basically over. The enemy could take advantage of the chaos and chase after them, especially when they met someone like Jiang Pengji who loved to fight. Even if she was the general guarding the pass, she would lead her troops out of the pass to chase after the enemy. How could they reduce casualties and deter the enemy from chasing after them? Of course, it was to send people to stall the enemy and fight while retreating. Only by maintaining the army's formation could they reduce losses. Exposing one's back to the enemy without taking any precautions was tantamount to handing over one's life to the enemy. Nielyang naturally wouldn't make such a mistake. While they retreated, the rain of arrows on the city wall didn't stop. The enemy slowly retreated more than 30 meters, but Jiang Pengji didn't dare to let her guard down. She frowned even more. Just a small fire attack. Nielyang looked at the city wall. Although he couldn't see who was standing on it, he was sure that Jiang Pengji was paying attention to the situation at the front like him. Of course, he remembered the humiliation yesterday. Today, he pretended to attack to test the enemy's strength, but he also wanted to get back at her. Unfortunately, Jiang Pengji was too cautious. She had already cleaned up the forest near Zhanjiang Pass. If not for this great fire might have surrounded the entire Zhanjiang Pass. It was a southeast wind that day. The wind wasn't strong, but it was just right for Nielyang. Thousands of archers shot arrows at the corpses below the city wall. Wave after wave, none of the arrows reached the battlements. Some soldiers who didn't know what was going on couldn't help but laugh. What was the use of shooting rockets at a dead person? Jiang Pengji's face turned solemn because she smelled a familiar pungent smell in the wind. It was easy to miss if one did not smell it carefully. Both sides had used fire arrows during the battle. As a result, the battlefield was filled with thick smoke. Some unlucky corpses were hit, and their clothes and corpses gave off a burnt smell. Under the cover of this smell, the smell of black oil, kerosene, and sulfur was easily ignored. Jiang Pengji stood on the city wall and looked down. She scanned her surroundings. After a while, she found that the clothes worn by the enemy's corpses were a little strange. Some of the soldiers even had firewood wrapped around their waists. The firewood was bound in linen cloth that had been washed with black oil. The scene of the battle between the two armies was extremely chaotic. Neither the supervisors nor the frontline soldiers noticed this, so it was easy to overlook it. This Niel Yang, Jiang Pengji clenched her fists. On the other side, Sun Wan, who was supervising the battle, also noticed that the speed at which the corpses were burning was abnormal. In the span of a few breaths, the small flame had turned into a towering blaze that quickly spread. If the city wall of Zhanjiang Pass had not been made of huge stones, the fire would have reached it. Seeing that Zhanjiang Pass in the distance was surrounded by orange flames that soared into the sky, Niel Yang's depressed mood eased a little. Zishuan, send someone to investigate which General Liu Shi promoted after this battle. On the battlefield, he could consecutively destroy several catapults in a very short period of time. Such archery skills could be considered valiant anywhere. He might not become the main general to lead the troops to kill the enemy, but he would not be a nobody. It was impossible for Jiang Pengji not to reward him generously for his meritorious service. Niel Yang only needed to send someone to pay attention to who was promoted and rewarded. He could basically lock onto his target. Wei Yong agreed in a low voice. He saw that Niel Yang's complexion had improved a little, and his mood also relaxed a lot. There's one thing that we need to pay attention to. The catapults under Liu Shi's command are obviously better than ours. Their power is extraordinary. Niel Yang's feigned attack was not only to regain his dignity, but also to find out the enemy's background and see what cards they had up their sleeves. When the enemy showed off the catapults, he did not pay attention, but he soon discovered that the frequency and distance of the catapults on the enemy's city wall were much higher than his own. If he only discovered this during the final battle, he would definitely be caught off guard by the enemy. He could still make up for it now. Wei Yong said, Liu Shi values the Mahists very much. He is very respectful to the scholars who are from the Mahists under his command. It is expected that the catapults are powerful. I'm just worried that other than the catapults, they are still hiding other killing moves that they have yet to reveal. Niel Yang asked him, did the spies we sent out find out any relevant information? Liu Shi is extremely cautious in his work, and he is very strict in guarding the supplies. No matter who it is, they need to show their token and register their name to enter and exit. Our spies can't find out more. Wei Yong shook his head regretfully and changed the topic. However, a few years ago, before Liu Shi grew up, I did leave a trick up my sleeve and ordered a few men of sacrifice to sneak into Dongqing. They seem to have gained a lot and are currently on their way back secretly. Niel Yang said, Zishuan is still more thoughtful. Wei Yong shook his head and sighed. No, it's only because of my third brother, that one called Wei Si. Niel Yang still remembered Wei Si. After all, there were not many men with such charm in the world. He was a person who left a deep impression. Speaking of which, Wei Si could be considered as Niel Yang's savior. If Wei Si had not taken his pulse, Niel Yang might have only realized that he had been tampered with before he died. Even if the Lord chosen by Zixiao doesn't show on the outside, there must be something extraordinary about her. We have to guard against her. If Jiang Pengji knew about this news, she might be angry for a while. In fact, Jiang Pengji was very angry now. The fire spread very quickly. Even though Qiguan Rang had sent people to fetch water, Niel Yang used black oil and other substances to ignite the fire. There were thousands of corpses burning underneath. It was impossible to extinguish the fire by relying on manpower. There was something that was even more annoying. When the enemy soldiers climbed the ladder for the last time, they secretly pierced the sack containing the black oil and let the black oil flow down the city wall. When the corpses below formed a big fire, the flames ignited the black oil on the city wall. The flames climbed up from below and spread to the towers and watchtowers on the city wall. For a moment, everyone was in a sorry state. Even so, Jiang Pengji could only suppress her anger and order people to move the injured soldiers and catapults on the city wall. Chapter 1483. The wind fanned the flames, and the fire burned vigorously. Even from far away, one could see the thick smoke rising into the sky from Zhangjiang Pass. Jiang Pengji and the rest looked calm. Not to mention them, the soldiers under the tent did not have any reaction. Those who were supposed to put out the fire did so. Those who were supposed to move the injured soldiers did so. And those who were supposed to move the catapult carts did so. The mental fortitude of the idle fish in the live broadcast room was not as strong. Many salted fish covered their mouths and vomited after watching for a while. Especially when Jiang Pengji said, "There's the smell of cooked meat in the air," the entire bullet screen stopped. She had been chased off the city gate tower by Qiguan Rang and was feeling gloomy. When she saw the salted fish's reaction, her depressed mood rose a few notches. "Host V, no way. How many years have you been with me? What kind of bloody and violent scenes have you not seen? This is just a small matter. Calm down. There are some things that the more one saw, the more one would naturally calm down." They were still lacking in knowledge. Jiang Pengji spoke casually, as if what was burning outside was not thousands of corpses but thousands of suckling pigs. "Tudu Feichio. You can never get used to this kind of thing. After all, the environment is different. Guikai Guofeng Xiao. Once again, I'm impressed. I can travel to another world, but not in the ancient times. If I have to be in the ancient times, I can't be in troubled times. If I have to be in troubled times, I can't be a soldier. If I have to be a soldier, I can't be a pawn." The victory of the two feudal vassals was basically piled up with the lives of the soldiers at the bottom. It wasn't that the host wasn't good, it was just that as a pawn, he really didn't have any future. Yin Tianmin, Grand Uncle Master. Speaking of time travel, I suddenly remembered that the next round of Dream of 1,000 Years will start the day after tomorrow. Puff up proud flat chest. He's a lucky emperor after all. His treatment shouldn't be that bad. It'll be a pain in the ass if he's sent to the battlefield. Yulongyin. Aren't they afraid of being thrown into the battlefield? Are they deserters? If they meet the streamer, maybe they can ask for her autograph and take a picture with her. The salted fish were the best at straying from the topic. Just a moment ago, they were trembling in fear, covering their mouths and vomiting. Now that their attention was diverted, they immediately began to imagine the identity of the next Dream of 1,000 Years lucky emperor. Some people teased, while others immediately came up with interesting jokes. Looking at the streaming room that had returned to normal, Jiang Pengji snorted secretly. She was really bored out of her mind. She was actually worried about these salted fishes not adapting well. They were clearly adapting well. She, on the other hand, should be the one worrying. Once again, I'm impressed by my brilliance. Jiang Pengji glanced at the god-slaying saber in her hand and sighed. If I hadn't cut down the nearby trees in advance, I don't know how long this fire would have lasted. Perhaps Niao Yang would have been able to take advantage of the situation and break through. Just as she was feeling emotional, the old general's private message rang. "Your Abba, it's going to rain soon. This is really the work of the Chosen One." Jiang Pengji's face was full of questions. Rain? At this time? She looked up at the sky. It had been dark since morning. She could see that it had been raining recently, but not today. The old chief quickly sent her another message, mocking Jiang Pengji's failure in geography. "Your Abba, even though you're already the Legion commander and the future marshal of the Federation, and no one will question your education background, don't let the cat out of the bag. Didn't you notice that the terrain of Zhangjiang Pass is very strange? The pass is narrow, the hinterland is wide, the mountains on both sides are high and steep, and the middle is low. This kind of terrain is quite bad in terms of air circulation. It should have been raining on your side, but the fire accelerated the formation of the rainwater. In my opinion, at this rate, it will rain in half an hour at most. Don't you think you should prepare for it?" Jiang Pengji also heard it, and she suddenly looked a little embarrassed. I entered the children's military school when I was very young. Within 2 years, I was directly recruited into the genetic warrior training camp. It's normal for me to fail my cultural classes. Jiang Pengji began to act shamelessly. How could she admit that she was not cultured enough? Really? It will rain in half an hour? The dear old chief only gave her the 8 syllables. It was up to her whether she believed it or not. Jiang Pengji, you're the top student, you're right. She was thinking about how to manipulate the situation when a gust of wind came in. My lord, I have something to report. Jiang Pengji said, coincidentally, I also have something to tell you. Wei Ci said, my lord, you may speak first. Jiang Pengji said, I have a premonition that it's going to rain soon. Wei Ci could not help but laugh. Coincidentally, I want to talk about this too. After the fire was ignited, the southeast wind, which was originally gentle, grew stronger. The wind fueled the fire, and it burned even more fiercely at the pass. The sky, which was initially bright, seemed to be covered with a layer of black gauze, and there was a faint trend of rain. Jiang Pengji smiled evilly. I hope that before the fire is extinguished, it will rain, even if it's just a drizzle. Exactly, Wei Ci said. At least the enemy will know. Jiang Pengji said to him, one is marked by the company one keeps. The ancients did not deceive me. Wei Ci was also black-hearted. If Niel Yang really knew, he would be so angry that he would be in trouble. It was not easy to get back at them with the fire, but who knew that the heavens would not give them face and send rain to help Jiang Pengji and the others extinguish the fire. Although this was a normal change in the weather, with a little use of public opinion, the image of their lord as the child of destiny could be created in an instant. Once it was confirmed, the soldiers under Niel Yang's tent would probably be restless for a while. They were naturally not afraid of fighting with others, but if they were to fight with the child of destiny chosen by the heavens, would there be any hope of victory? Once the morale of the army was shaken, the morale would also be low. Jiang Pengji was used to using her advantages, so she would naturally not let go of this marketing opportunity. She looked at Wei Ci and said, Zi Xiao, do you think I should set up an altar or perform a sword dance to pray for rain? It would be more effective? Wei Ci said, no, if there's no rain, won't the Lord be passive? Even if Wei Ci was 90% confident, he dared not joke around with Jiang Pengji's reputation. Wei Ci rejected it, and Jiang Pengji did not insist. She did not like to dance. The two of them muttered. Qiguan Rang and the others were in a much more difficult situation. Old Master Sun Wen was sent away due to his old age, so he could not leave at will. His originally fair and clean face was smoked black, and the beard that he carefully groomed every day was also a little burnt. Because the fire could not be controlled, Qiguan Rang could only retreat from the danger zone. The medic saw that the back of his hand was red and swollen, and he suggested, Military advisor, the back of your hand is swollen. Why don't you apply some ointment on it first? Qiguan Rang agreed. When a medic applied ointment on his hand, a drop of water fell on his eyelashes. He blinked subconsciously, and after a while, another drop of water fell between his eyebrows. Qiguan Rang widened his eyes in shock, and he asked the medic with difficulty, Do you feel anything? There seemed to be raindrops just now, at this moment. Chapter 1484. It's not an illusion. It's really raining. Qiguan Rang, who was always calm, did not care that the medics were still bandaging his wounds. He suddenly raised his hands high and pretended to catch the rain. The rain changed very quickly. At first, it was a drizzle, but soon it became a torrential downpour, drenching him from head to toe. Qiguan Rang did not care about his current embarrassing appearance. He could not help but hold his knees with both hands and bend over to laugh. He laughed so hard that he almost cried. On the other side, Sun Wen also ran into the rain. His eyes were filled with shock and surprise. He could not believe what he saw. Grandpa, Grandpa, Sun Lan secretly ran over because she was worried about Sun Wen. She happened to see her grandfather running into the rain. The rain is so heavy. Why don't you find a place to hide? An old man's body was incomparable to a young man's. Sun Lan was really worried that his grandfather would fall ill in the rain. He could not take the shock. He used the umbrella in his hand to shelter Sun Wan from the rain. He did not care that most of his clothes were wet. Sun Wan said, "I'll take you to shelter from the rain first. I'll cook a bowl of ginger soup later to ward off the cold." Sun Wan laughed heartily as he gave his grandson a tight hug. He patted his grandson's back and said with a smile, "Today was really a joyous day. This rain couldn't have come at a better time. Ha ha! I can't wait to see how ugly Niel Yang and the others' faces are." Sun Wan and the Nye family had a deep grudge. Even if Niel Yang was not a real enemy, he was still a disciple of the Nye family. They were on opposing sides. It was hard to say who would win the battle that day, but Niel Yang set a big fire before he left, which made Jiang Pengji's side very embarrassed, who knew that even the heavens could not stand it anymore. It rained heavily in time and suppressed the rapid fire. It was simply rain from the gods. Sun Wan had not laughed so freely in a long time since he left Zhongzhou and came to Dongqing. Sun Lan felt a lump in her throat when she heard her grandfather being so happy. After much persuasion, the old man was finally appeased. When the grandfather and grandson went to the commander's tent, they happened to meet Qiguan Rang, who came in the rain. Sun Wan exchanged greetings with him, smiled, and modestly offered a few pleasantries. Sun Lan could not help but say, "Even if you want to be modest, wait until you enter the main tent. You'll probably have to drink a few bowls of ginger soup." After he finished speaking, Qiguan Rang and Sun Lan entered the commander's tent with smiles. He was chased out by Jiang Pengji not long after he entered. "There's nothing urgent right now. You should at least change into a clean set of clothes first. Aren't you afraid of being rude?" Jiang Pengji sent them out to change their clothes. She then asked the soldiers to cook a big pot of ginger soup to ward off the cold. The heavy rain came quickly. Many people were completely drenched before they could react. Jiang Pengji waited for a while before the marshal's tent was slowly filled with people. As the defending party, the casualties on Jiang Pengji's side were not small, and the losses were even greater. After all, arrows could be recycled. When cleaning up the battlefield, not only did they have to clean up the corpses, but they also had to recycle the arrows. Otherwise, based on the scale of 100,000 people, who knew how many arrows would be used to fight a battle? Who could afford to waste so many arrows? If one side won, not only would they be able to retrieve their own arrows, but they would also be able to retrieve the enemy's arrows and increase their military resources. If Niel Yang retreated obediently, Jiang Pengji could send people out of the city to clean up the battlefield and recover the usable resources. In the end, Niel Yang burned everything down with a big fire. He admitted his loss, but Jiang Pengji's loss could not be recovered. All in all, she suffered a great loss in this defensive battle. If it was not for the rain that struck the enemy's morale and public opinion, she would be even more depressed. Jiang Pengji was depressed, but Niel Yang was so angry that he vomited blood. The Nye army retreated and left, returning to the camp in a grandiose manner. Not long after they arrived at the camp, Niel Yang's son, Nye Qing, led a group of officials who had stayed behind to welcome Niel Yang. Niel Yang had just dismounted from the horse's back when he suddenly felt something cold on the back of his hand. What was his feeling? Not long after, another drop of water dripped on the back of his hand. He then knew that it was not an illusion. Looking at the drop of water, Niel Yang's heart tightened. His face was as pale as a wall that had been painted white. "Father, what's wrong?" Nye Qing stood on the right to support Niel Yang, while Wei Dan stood on the left to take care of him. "This is rain." Wei Dan raised his hand, and a few drops of rain fell on his palm. His phoenix eyes gradually widened, and his eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. Nye Qing did not understand. He felt for a while and said, "It's indeed raining. It's normal to rain at this time of year." He found that after he finished speaking, his father Niel Yang's arm was stiff and stiff, as though he was forcefully holding onto something. "Father?" Nye Qing asked. Niel Yang's expression turned livid. Caught off guard, he spat out a large mouthful of blood, and his body fell backwards. Nye Qing was so shocked by this turn of events that he did not know how to react. It was Wei Dan who went forward to catch Niel Yang and quickly helped him up. "Quick!" Wei Dan was so frightened that cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His refined voice cracked and was filled with panic. "Quick, call the doctor." Many of Niel Yang's confidants knew that his body was not well, and a small number of people had also seen some clues. However, he was extremely calm in front of others. This was the first time he had spat out blood and fainted in front of others. It would not take long for the news to spread throughout the camp. Niel Yang was furious this time. Even a normal person would be injured, let alone a patient like him. The doctor had used all his strength to save him and had even used strong medicine to keep him alive. Seeing this, everyone broke out in a cold sweat for him. Do your best and leave it to the heavens. If he does not wake up tomorrow, I'm afraid. The white-haired and bearded doctor shook his head and sighed heavily. Everyone's hearts sank when they saw this. After this torment, it was already late at night. The heavy rain had finally stopped, and the puddles on the ground were filled with rainwater. Niechingi took care of the seriously ill Niel Yang, his eyes bloodshot. Niel Yang frowned when he saw this. He said sincerely, "Elder brother, Uncle will definitely be able to turn this into safety." Nieching knelt by Niel Yang's bed, his face full of self-blame. He had learned of the situation at the front lines from the generals who had participated in the battle and understood why his father had spat out blood after the rain. The heavens were on the enemy's side. A heavy rain had ruined Niel Yang's plans. How could he not be furious and spit out blood? Niel Yang said, "This matter is clearly Lu Shi's fault. Elder brother, why do you blame yourself? If Uncle knew, he would definitely be displeased and scold you. How could a man be so indecisive?" Niel Yang vomiting blood. In the end, it had nothing to do with Nie Qing. What was he blaming himself for? Nie Qing said, "I would rather father wake up and scold me, or ask for the family rules, than watch him struggle on the line between life and death." Nie Yang did not say anything else. He only stayed by Nie Qing's side silently. The system's cold sarcasm entered his ears. "Nie Qing must be extremely touched by you right now. It's a pity. Who would know that you were the main culprit who harmed Niel Yang?" Nie Yang did not show it on his face, but he laughed coldly in his heart. "Shut up. Why would the system listen? Ever since it ruthlessly punished Nie Yang, their roles have been swapped." Chapter 1485. The matter of Niel Yang vomiting blood and fainting was suppressed by Wei Yong. Any soldier who dared to talk about it in private would be punished. After a series of harsh measures, the unstable morale of the army temporarily calmed down, but everyone knew that it was only temporary. There were 70,000 soldiers who participated in the battle during the day. These people had witnessed how the fire at Zhangjiang Pass started and knew how the fire was extinguished. Even God did not give them face and stood on the enemy's side. They were very flustered and worried about their future. Fighting with people was endless joy, but wasn't fighting with God courting death? That night, many people were so worried that they could not sleep well. Niel Yang also woke up in the early morning. He clearly felt that his body was much heavier than before, and he had no strength in his entire body. As soon as he turned his head, he saw his tired son lying on the side of the bed. Another person called Nie Yang was also lying on the side and sleeping soundly. "My lord is awake." Wei Yong noticed that his lord was awake immediately, and his anxious mood instantly calmed down. Niel Yang used his eyes to signal Wei Yong to speak softly so as not to wake Nie Qing. He closed his eyes and thought about the reason for his coma. He sighed and asked, "What was the situation after I fainted?" Wei Yong said, "There was no movement on Lu Shi's side. Some soldiers in the camp spread rumors and dealt with it immediately. The morale of the army could not be shaken. Once it was shaken, the war would not be easy to fight." Niel Yang said weakly, "Despite all the calculations, I didn't expect God to be on her side. She calculated the hearts of men, but she lacked a trace of God's will. After all, he was an ancient person. He did not know that the fire would heat up the air on the ground and cause it to expand and rise. He also did not know that the air above would contract and sink. The two would cause the water vapor in the air to condense into clouds and mist. Recently, the weather was about to rain. Niel Yang's fire only brought the rain forward. Not knowing this, Neil Yang would naturally attribute this coincidental rain to God's will like the others. Wei Yong said, "My lord, why do you say such depressing words? So what if it's God's will? Everything depends on human effort." Neil Yang smiled weakly. You're right. He had never been a person who believed in fate, but this coincidence made him crazy. My lord, please rest for a while. I will call the doctor over now. Niang was shrouded in a layer of haze, but Jiang Pengji, who was his opponent, could not cheer up. On the contrary, she flipped over the bronze table in anger. Bai Ning immediately stepped forward to plead for leniency. My lord, please calm your anger. This general thinks that there are many suspicious points in this matter. We might as well return and continue the interrogation. He had no choice but to stand up. His daughter, Bai Yuexia, was also involved in the leak of the carpentry workshop secrets. He had never seen his lord so angry before. He was so scared that his liver trembled. Jiang Pengji suppressed her anger and did not continue tormenting the bronze table. Perhaps she would not have the chance to do so in the future. Why? The bronze table covered with his lord's handprints was bent in her rage. Aside from Bai Ning, there were also others who stood up to plead for Zhang Ping, Xiao Guang, and the others. Jiang Pengji's anger was too terrifying. They were really worried that their lord would order the execution of the three of them in a fit of anger. Why did he want to kill them? Because many of the carpentry workshop's secrets were leaked. Zhang Ping and the other two were implicated. Old Man Sun wanted to say a few words to persuade Jiang Pengji to punish them lightly and spare their lives. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw that Wei Ci was as still as a mountain. He could not help but frown. Zhang Ping and Wei Ci were close friends. The former was in trouble, but the latter did not say anything. Either Wei Ci was clean and gave up on his friend Zhang Ping, refusing to plead for him and sully himself, or Wei Ci was confident that nothing would happen to Zhang Ping and the others. Sun Wen glanced at Qiguan Rang again and found that he was also as calm as Mount Tai. He held his newly made feather fan and closed his eyes in deep thought. Well, it looked like it was the latter. That was the truth. Although Jiang Pengji was angry, she did not plan to do anything to Zhang Ping and the others, let alone order their execution. She calmed her anger and glanced at the messenger. She said, "Tell me everything in detail." The matter was simple. Because of Zhang Ping and the others' negligence, a spy had infiltrated the carpentry workshop. The spy had a photographic memory and had quietly stolen several confidential drawings from the carpentry workshop. For several years, no clues had been found. It was only recently that a flaw was revealed. The spy was ready to slip away. He found an excuse that his mother was sick and asked Zhang Ping for a 7-day leave to visit his family. However, the spy did not return after 7 days. Zhang Ping was worried and sent someone to check the spy's address. Only then did he find that the house was empty. If that was the case, he would at most be suspicious. However, Zhang Ping found a fragment of old and yellowed rice paper in a bird's nest near the house. Although the fragment was only a small corner, Zhang Ping could still recognize that it was part of the design of a new crossbow that had been developed a while ago. He immediately became suspicious and ordered people to search everywhere. Finally, they found a few relatively complete drawings in the house of Sluggard nearby. The Sluggard said, "When that Mr. packed his things and left, he threw a pile of paper into the charcoal basin. I secretly stole some of them and hid them in my house. There are even words on them. When my son grows up, he can learn a word or two. Sir, I'm really not a thief." Zhang Ping felt dizzy when he heard this. The carpentry workshop had strict rules. No drawings could be taken out, and the confidential contents would be backed up and hidden in a secret storeroom. The storeroom had 3 locks, and only he, Xiao Guang, and Bai Yuexia could open it with the keys. The storeroom was heavily guarded, and there hadn't been any unusual movements recently. The only explanation was that the spy had secretly recorded the drawings and made a copy when he came back. Zhang Ping realized that the situation wasn't good and immediately reported this matter to Su Ku, Feng Jin, and the others. On one hand, they sent troops to kill the spy, and on the other, they carefully investigated the truth of the matter. This spy was a member of the Mo family who had sought refuge with Zhang Ping many years ago. Because Zhang Ping disliked his ability, he had never been put in an important position. Later, the spy was transferred to Xiao Guang's side. Xiao Guang had a good temper and would occasionally give the spy some work. The real reason this spy was promoted was because of Bai Yuexia. Bai Yuexia had discovered that the spy had a photographic memory. Although this person's talent was weak and his creative ability was lacking, he was honest, loyal, and willing to endure hardships. After a few years of experience, he slowly climbed up. After accumulating enough experience, Bai Yuexia would occasionally guide him, and the spy once again entered the eyes of Zhang Ping and Xiao Guang. For the past year, the spy had participated in the remodeling design and was qualified to access the confidential drawings, so he secretly made a copy. Because Zhang Ping and the others would update the drawings at any time and make changes to the details, the spy had quite a few copies. He took the final version of the draft and burned the rest, but he didn't expect a nearby sluggard to intercept a part of it. Jiang Pengji continued to ask about the spy, such as his name, background, and ancestral home. On the other side, Wei Si's brows furrowed more tightly as he listened. He had never thought that the spy would be this person. Shi Zhong, an ordinary name, was a typical example of a person who was unknown throughout his life. However, he had an extraordinary and extremely famous wife, Bai Yuexia. Yes, in her previous life, Bai Yuexia's husband was Shi Zhong. Chapter 1486. May fall in love with you. Oh no, the streamer hates betrayal the most, not to mention betraying her with a bunch of confidential drawings. Xiankio, TSK, how is this betrayal? She has a boss, so she's a spy. If she doesn't care about her boss but works hard for the streamer instead, that's abnormal, isn't it? However, this operation is indeed disgusting. Although the salted fish were always complaining about Jiang Pengji's bad luck, if she really encountered something that didn't go her way, the salted fish were even more furious than she was. The streamer in front of them is their 5 million salted fish coach. No one can bully her except them. Tangled Pegasus, sigh. Am I the only one worried about Zhang Ping and the other two? Although this was done by a spy, they're also responsible for their negligence. The missing drawings are most likely a military secret. These charges are probably not easy to get away with. Because Zhang Ping and the others were technical geeks and engineering students, they rarely appeared in front of Jiang Pingji, and the salted fish rarely saw them. Even so, the salted fish still quite liked the three, and there were also spontaneously organized fan groups among the people. Zhang Ping and the others made a big mistake, and the salted fish could not help but feel worried for them. When Bai Ning and the others pleaded for mercy, some salted fish also echoed and pleaded for mercy. Some salted fish even suggested crowdfunding to reduce the punishment. However, a few salted fish bosses saw it clearly. In Yuejia Zhuge Qinma. Not to that extent. The charge of inadequate supervision can be serious or minor. It all depends on the streamer's choice. Zhang Ping and the others did not collude with the spy, and the streamer has been vigorously supporting technological research and development. She will most likely be lenient. While the salted fish argued endlessly, Jiang Pengji also made a statement. She fined Zhang Ping and the others a year's salary. It was a small punishment, but a big warning. At the same time, she asked the three to reflect on their actions and settle the score when they returned. For 3 highly paid personnel, this little punishment was really just a drizzle. Bai Ning secretly heaved a sigh of relief and stopped pleading for his daughter, lest it backfire and make the Lord hate him. He changed the topic at the right time and turned his gaze to the spy named Shi Zhong. He must catch him and punish him. Jiang Pengji said expressionlessly, "How can it be so easy to catch him and punish him? We still don't know who Shi Zhong is working for." Even though Feng Jin, Su Ku, and the others had immediately sent troops to capture them, they were too late. The golden period had long passed. Because there was no progress in the pursuit, they could only quickly order the various checkpoints to pay attention to suspicious people. They would rather catch 1,000 wrongly than let one go. When Shi Zhong's news reached Jiangpingji, there was no news of the spy anywhere. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Everyone could only speculate which faction Shi Zhong belonged to based on the clues left behind. Shi Zhong's case was very serious, but Jiangpingji was at the front line. She had no extra energy to look for a needle in a haystack. After discussing for a while, everyone dispersed. Wei Xiai took a stroll outside and returned. Jiangpingji said, "Aren't you burying your head in the sand? Apart from a few people with bad eyesight and a few people with no brains, who doesn't know that you and I have been in cahoots for a long time? If you go out for a spin and come back, it will give people the feeling that you're hiding something and make them suspicious." When Wei Xiai heard the words hooking up and committing adultery, he immediately felt that his lord needed to take up some cultural lessons. "I know that person called Shi Zhong." Wei Xiai coughed softly and briefly explained the reason for his visit. "What? You know him? Why didn't you say it just now?" Jiangpingji knew the reason after thinking for a while. "It's inconvenient to say." Wei Xiai knew him, but it was inconvenient to say it. The only explanation was that he knew Shi Zhong in his previous life. It's indeed inconvenient. Although we don't have any interaction in this life, we met a few times in our previous life. I know a little. In this life, Wei Xiai and Shi Zhong did not have any interaction at all. He could not possibly use the excuse of calculating with his fingers and observing the sky at night to fool people. He continued, "Shi Zhong's ancestral home is in Zhongzhou Maozhou. Because of his inelegant appearance and short stature, he was rejected to become an official. In this era, one could not become an official just by having talent and background. It also depended on one's height, appearance, physical disability, and skin that was exposed. In short, if one did not look good, he would not be qualified to become an official. He could only be an ordinary person for the rest of his life. Even if there were other ways to become an official, he would most likely not be put in an important position. He would be mediocre for the rest of his life and would not be able to stand out. Yes, the world that valued appearance was that cruel. As a member of the club that did not meet the standards for looks, Shi Zhong's experience was naturally bumpy. He first sought refuge with the local gentry family in Maozhou as a guest. Because he was ugly and had no ability, he sat on the bench for a year. They did not want to keep a freeloader, so they tactfully chased him away. Shi Zhong could only look for another family. Finally, under the recommendation of a friend, he entered the Wei family in Bianzhou and became a guest. The Wei family in Bianzhou? Isn't that the birthplace of your ancestral home? Wei Xiai nodded and replied, "My ancestor was indeed a branch of the Wei family in Bianzhou and finally settled in Langye County. However, the branch in Langye County moved back to Bianzhou 10 years ago in order to protect the descendants of the family. This is also a way out. In her previous life, Wei Xiai followed them to Zhongzhou at that time. In this life, he rejected it and stayed in Langye County with a few servants." Jiangpingji nodded and did not interrupt. Wei Xiai continued, "The Wei family in Bianzhou have many handsome men. With Shi Zhong's looks and talents, he became a guest under the Wei family. One can imagine his situation." Jiangpingji looked at Wei Xi's face. She deeply agreed with the phrase, "The Wei family has many handsome men." In that case, the person who sent him to be a spy is very likely to be your elder brother. Jiangpingji remembered that the Wei family was considered a first-class gentry family in Bianzhou. A few years ago, the Wei family's status was not as high as it was now. They had no right to order the Wei family's guest to be a spy. After thinking about it, she found a possibility. Shi Zhong was sent by Wei Qiong. "My lord's guess coincides with mine," Wei Xiai said. "In fact, Shi Zhong was one of my elder brother's men in my previous life." Of course, Shi Zhong did not have the opportunity to be a spy in his previous life. When their emperor attacked Zhongzhou, Nielyang had already knelt down. His elder brother Wei Qiong had been depressed for many years and passed away before he was 50. What abilities does Shi Zhong have? Wei Xiai smiled and said, "He doesn't have many abilities. He just has a good memory, good handwriting, and looks honest on the outside. My elder brother in my previous life took a fancy to this. That's why he let Shi Zhong stay by his side to help organize the documents. Occasionally, he would write and correct some chores. Shi Zhong has never stood out in his life. His mother has a stubborn personality. She chased away a few daughters-in-law and insisted that her son marry a good one. Jiang Pengji frowned. Who did Shi Zhong marry in the end? Wei Ci said, General Bai Ning's only daughter, Bai Yuexia. How can that be? I don't have much contact with Bai Yuexia, but I know that she has a strong temperament. How could she fall for such a person? Chapter 1487. Wei Ci also smiled bitterly. Regarding this point, he vaguely heard the reason from Her Majesty. There are no more than 3 reasons why Bai Yuexia chose Shi Zhong. First, Shi Zhong knew how to please his father-in-law and increase Bai Ning's favorability. Second, Bai Yuexia also felt that she should have a child to continue the bloodline and let her father, Bai Ning, feel more at ease in his old age. Third, Shi Zhong was a man with no ability, and was easy to bully. No matter how much he roared or barked, he was still the same. When all men are men, there is only one father. What the ancient said makes some sense. In summary, Bai Yuexia was willing to end her single life only for her old father, Bai Ning. There were many men in the world who could be a husband, but there was only one father. How could the two be compared? It was not appropriate for him to say these details, so he just vaguely explained the general situation. He said Bai Yuexia was almost 30 in her previous life, but she still refused to get married. General Bai Ning was very worried. Shi Zhong was forced by his mother, and somehow he set his eyes on her, hoping that Bai Yuexia could help him in his career. Shi Zhong was self-aware and did not take the initiative to approach the girl. Instead, he took a detour to look for General Bai Ning. After a while, he had a good impression of her. Shi Zhong pretended to be good before marriage, but after a few years of marriage, he revealed his true nature. He could not tolerate his wife being in a high position and humiliating his dignity as a husband. Jiang Pengji laughed. That's funny. On one hand, he wants his wife to help him, but on the other hand, he can't tolerate his wife being in a higher position than him. What does that mean? Does he think that if Bai Yuexia helped him and gave him a chance, he would be able to rise to the top? Doesn't he have any idea what kind of qualifications he has? Wei Ci said, there are many people in this world who are more ambitious than the sky. Maybe that's what he thinks. In the end, Bai Yuexia and Shi Zhong were married for a few years and had 2 children. Shi Zhong was still a small official who could not be put in an important position, but Bai Yuexia's career became smoother and smoother. She became the Minister of Works, one of the 6 ministries. Everyone in the imperial court knew that Bai Yuexia had a good-for-nothing husband. When his colleagues gathered together, there were always people who teased or ridiculed Shi Zhong, asking him why, as the head of the family, he couldn't control his wife. Shi Zhong had long held a grudge against Bai Yuexia for not doing her best to support him. Now, he was even more furious and jealous. He did not know when it started, but Shi Zhong started to wander around the red light district. The first time he went there, his colleague informed Bai Yuexia. Bai Yuexia waited for him to return to the mansion and interrogate him. Shi Zhong knew his colleague's secret and was ashamed and angry. He lost his composure and wanted to use domestic violence. As the daughter of a general, how could Bai Yuexia be at a disadvantage? On the contrary, it was Shi Zhong who was beaten black and blue by her, crying and wailing. After learning the whole story of her son's beating, Shi Zhong's mother secretly urged Bai Yuexia to resign from her position and stay at home to serve her husband and teach her son. Shi Zhong's mother pushed and fought, and Bai Yuexia had a miscarriage. She didn't know she was pregnant until she miscarried. Jiang Pengji said, in this world, other than blood-related men and married men, what man can't be a husband? She can actually tolerate it? Wei Ci said, of course she didn't. Coincidentally, Her Majesty was implementing the one family, 2 household system. She used her official position to force Shi Zhong to agree. She originally wanted to register both children into her family and then prepare for a divorce. However, Shi Zhong and his mother refused to agree, and the law did not support Bai Yuexia's taking the 2 children. so she took her eldest daughter away. This daughter is very promising, but that son was raised to be useless. Bai Yuexia's eldest daughter was chosen to be the study companion of the crown prince, Jiangyan. Looking at the relationship between the two children, they would definitely be the left and right arms of the young emperor in the future. Bai Yuexia's son was raised to be arrogant and willful by Shi Zhong and his mother. After Shi Zhong remarried, his wife maliciously praised him to death. When the child was 15 years old, he fought with others and rode a horse to race. He trampled 6 people to death and was finally sentenced to death. Jiang Pengji was not surprised. Shi Zhong and his mother are not good. How can they teach their child well under the influence of what they see and hear? Wei Ci said, "That child, I'm afraid his innate talent is not good. He takes after his father." Before Bai Yuexia divorced, she was the one who raised the child. Not long after the divorce, Bai Yuexia found out about her son's situation in the residence. She wanted to raise him, but unexpectedly, the child pointed his finger at his biological mother and insulted her, comparing her to a prostitute. Bai Yuexia was so angry that she completely gave up on this son and refused to acknowledge him anymore. Of course, in the end, she was the one who sent people to the market to collect her son's corpse. Their mother-son relationship was limited to that. Shi Zhong is really a bad person. After he separated from Bai Yuexia, he often referred to himself as the husband of the Minister of Works. Usually, he would drink and drink with his scoundrels and gossip about Bai Yuexia's private affairs. He often visited brothels, and his mother slandered and insulted him everywhere. Officials were very concerned about their reputation. No matter what happened internally, their reputation must not be tainted on the surface. If Bai Yuexia was not trusted by Her Majesty, and she was usually cautious and reliable, she would probably be depressed by the imperial censor's criticism. Wei Ci said, "I thought that Bai Yuexia had long entered the Lord's tent, and she would not meet Shi Zhong. I didn't expect to meet him in this way." Jiang Pengji said, "Maybe this is called fate. Even if it's fate, it's an ill-fated relationship." Wei Ci sighed. "Compared to Shi Zhong, I think Shiheng is better. It's a pity that Shiheng has worked with her for several years, but they still address each other as colleagues. There doesn't seem to be any romantic feelings between them. If the two of them can get married, it will be perfect." Zhang Ping was fated to have a plum wife and a crane son in his previous life. This was also his pursuit, so Wei Ci could not persuade him otherwise. In this life, he saw that Zhang Ping's obsession with being single for the rest of his life was not very deep. Perhaps there was a chance. Jiang Pengji said, "If you were an iceman, I'm afraid you would starve to death." Wei Ci asked why. Jiang Pengji said, "Matchmaking is also a skill. How can I mess around like you?" Wei Ci held back his laughter and said, "I hope that my lord can point out the right path." Jiang Pengji said, as if she had been through it, "To deal with this kind of situation, you should get straight to the point. Don't pretend to be ambiguous. Ask them what their impression of each other is and whether they are willing to lie in the same coffin after 100 years. Won't that solve the problem?" Wei Ci was speechless. Wasn't this too simple and crude? "I'll go back and try. Maybe I could be a matchmaker. I haven't been to a wedding for a long time." Jiang Pengji hesitated for a while and said, "Wait, why do you want to matchmake Shiheng and Yuexia and not someone else? It's not that I'm biased, but Shiheng has a dignified appearance. If he has the intention to get married, I'm afraid that his family's doorstep will be flattened by icemen. The possibility of him choosing Yuexia doesn't seem high." Wei Ci held back his laughter and said, "Shiheng doesn't rely on a face to distinguish beauty from ugliness. He relies on his hands." Because of this strange illness, others thought that Zhang Ping was arrogant and difficult to get along with. Wei Ci was one of the few friends he had. He took the initiative to get to know Wei Ci only because he had a pair of hands that made people fall in love at first sight. Chapter 1488. So he's face-blind. Based on his situation, it's indeed difficult for him to find someone he likes. After all, no one knew what kind of hand Zhang Ping liked. No matter how good-looking Wei Ci's hands were, they belonged to someone. They couldn't give them away. Wei Ci said, My lord, why don't you send someone to guard the mountains near Zhanjiang Pass? Maybe there will be some gains. Since Shizhong was sent by Wei Si's elder brother, Wei Dan, he would definitely find a way to hand the things over to Wei Dan after stealing the secrets. At this time, Wei Dan was in the Nye camp outside the pass. Shizhong would definitely not go far. He would most likely cross the border nearby and sneak in. Jiang Pengji nodded. I understand. Later, send someone to guard and arrest any suspicious people. Since the end of the siege, the troops of the two armies had not moved. Niel Yang needed to recuperate, and Jiang Pengji needed to reorganize the troops. She counted with her fingers. The supplies sent by the logistics were almost here. Time passed in a flash. The new episode of Dream of 1,000 Years began the lucky draw. The 5 million salted fish rubbed their hands excitedly. Yin Rian, make another wish. I'm willing to exchange 15 pounds of meat for a dream of 1,000 years! Tong Meng, I also make a wish. I'm willing to exchange Tang Qi for a dream of 1,000 years! Fu Duo, choose me, choose me. I woke up early today to go to Jinshan Temple to pray. I'm very devout. Looking at the screen full of prayers and metaphysics, Jiang Pengji sighed and pressed the lucky draw button. Countless salted fish IDs flashed in the center of the screen. After a minute, there was a beep. The lucky emperor was born. Lan Shui Yubuja. Me. It's actually me. I'm so lucky. Goodbye, I'm going to cross over. The lucky emperor was so excited that he was incoherent. The other salted fish felt sour in their hearts and roared angrily. Bah! Because of the previous lucky emperor strategy posts, the salted fish were seriously prepared, regardless of whether they were lucky enough to cross over. Maybe one day they would be lucky enough to cross over. The new lucky emperor happily ran to her Simmons bed. She did not take off her clothes or shoes. She lay flat on the bed and closed her eyes. Not long after, she felt a sense of weightlessness, as if she had flown into the sky. When she opened her eyes, the scenery around her had changed greatly. She was not lying on a spring mattress, but wild grass and gravel. No way. So unlucky. A slightly deep male voice escaped from his throat, scaring her into covering her mouth. After a while, she carefully moved her other hand down to his Adam's apple, and then down to his flat chest. She continued to move down, and her face turned red as she let go of her hand. Oh my, not only did he come to the wilderness, he even turned into a man. She mumbled as she looked around and found a screen floating in the air. The screen was filled with comments from a salted fish. Since she had read the previous European Emperor's Guide, she accepted it very well and did not make a fuss about it. Hi, everyone. Baby is the new lucky king. Acting cute. #carrot. Carrot hashtag. Unexpectedly, the salted fishes didn't bite at all. They all sent vomiting emojis. To do Faccio. Find a puddle and look at yourself. Don't act cute if your looks aren't good enough. It hurts my eyes. Jinging. It's not too ugly, but it's below the standard of a normal person. The killing power of acting cute is comparable to Sister Fong, who just debuted. The salted fishes chatted one after another. The European emperor couldn't help but raise his hand to touch his face and look for a puddle. I was scared to death. She was so scared that she half squatted and jumped to the side. This is deep in the forest. My luck is too bad. Do I have to stay here for the precious 12 hours? It had been raining heavily outside, and the man's clothes were wet. His face looked sickly, and it was obvious that he had been sick. She turned around and carried the man's luggage and bookcase on her back, so that the original owner wouldn't wake up and find his belongings gone. As a good baby who had grown up in the new era, she couldn't cause trouble for others, even if she had transmigrated. I've transmigrated. I can't go back without even seeing an ancient person. That's too much. She cheered herself on. In order to reduce her fear, she forced herself to think of messy things. For example, she started to run wildly while walking. You guys don't know that before I transmigrated, I was an A-cup, so I didn't know how painful it was for a girl with big boobs to run 800 meters. Later, my childhood friend told me that if a man ran naked, It would be painful. Now I've finally experienced it. The ancient people really didn't have underwear. The thing between their legs swung when they ran, and the faster they ran, the more painful it was. Tong Tong's girl, you're indeed an old lady. I admit defeat. With the salted fishes joking around, the European emperor was not very afraid, but that was all. Not long after, Jiang Pengji sent a bullet scream. Don't go forward. Stop and step back. There are snakes in front. Oh my. The European emperor was so scared that her whole body trembled. She was most afraid of snakes. She took a closer look and saw a few snakes coiled on the tree in front of her. She stepped back carefully and was so scared that tears came out her eyes. The system considerately gave her an electronic map. The red dots on it meant that there were dangerous beasts. The European emperor only needed to put her hand on the red dots to see the species of the beasts. A rough scan showed that 70% of them were snakes. The density of snakes in the wild was too high, wasn't it? But made sense. In her era, the number of humans had skyrocketed, squeezing too much living space. Snakes had no habitat, so it was a problem for them to reproduce and survive. It was different in ancient times. The number of humans was small, and there were many habitats in the wild. Snakes could restrain humans, so the density was naturally high. Careful to avoid dangerous creatures, she climbed down the mountain, stumbling. She didn't know if the man climbed over the mountain and wanted to go down, or if he just climbed a few dozen meters. Anyway, she refused to stay in the forest with wild beasts. After spending more than an hour, she finally went down the mountain. Oh my, there's smoke over there. It's almost noon. She could vaguely see smoke rising from the horizon, and she could vaguely see the outline of some buildings. Her heart was moved. She opened her arms and hugged the sky. She felt better than ever. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Wait a minute, the environment that this lucky emperor was in seemed a little familiar. At that moment, Jiang Pengji felt that the camp was boring. She randomly found an excuse to patrol the camp, and the two of them took a walk on horseback. Of course, to ensure safety, there were hundreds of guards following behind them. While they were chatting, they paid attention to the European emperor in the streaming room, in case the child was stopped by the poisonous snakes. Little Erlang, carry your school bag to school. The European emperor hummed a nursery rhyme and found a white horse and a red dress reflected on the stream not far away. Because this body was short-sighted, she couldn't see very clearly. Who is it? Accompanied by the pleasant and somewhat familiar male voice, she heard the sound of a sharp sword being unsheathed. She panicked. In the blink of an eye, the sharp sword in Wei Si's hand was already against her neck. CI. Beauty CI? Oh my, she won the lottery. Chapter 1489. Beauty CI? Wei Si did not know if she was referring to him, but just the word beauty was enough to make him angry. No matter how well-mannered Wei Si was, he could not hold it in any longer. He angrily rebuked, Lecher. De-lecher? The salted fish Lucky King could not help but exclaim, even scolding people sounds so nice. Jiang Pengji knew very well that even though she said that Wei Si's martial arts skills were at the level of a small class of square dancers, it was not a problem for him to deal with an empty-handed salted fish who was obsessed with beauty. If salted fish was allowed to do as he pleased, Wei Si might not be able to hold back and stab someone to death. Zixiao, what's wrong? Jiang Pengji clamped the horse's abdomen and walked forward leisurely. White snorted and did as she said. It looked extremely docile. Hearing these words, the salted fish Lucky King could not help but look at the newcomer. Because she was short-sighted, she couldn't see clearly at first. She only saw a red shadow on a white horse approaching her. When the other party arrived in front of her, four words suddenly popped up in her mind. Fresh clothes and furious horses. The woman on the back of the horse was dressed in red, and there was a faint smile on her handsome face. The white horse she was riding on was snow white from head to toe, and there was not a single flaw on it. The salted fish European king stood rooted to the ground. He stared at the screen for a long time, and his brain froze for a moment. Unbeknownst to him, the live stream was already bursting at the seams. Countless unlucky people were wailing in anguish, passionately portraying what it meant to be envious, jealous, and hateful. Tudu Faccio. This is a historic moment. I never thought that salted fish would have the chance to be in the same frame as the host. Yi Wu Yimling, I'm so jealous. Why is it that when I transmigrated, I was so far away from the host, but when she transmigrated, she had the opportunity to meet the host couple? It was heartbreaking enough to see the guy who ate by rubbing his feet, but he didn't expect this guy to be the real deal. Guikai Guofeng Xiao. Did you guys notice that each time I transmigrated, the luckier one by one? Does this mean that the next time I transmigrate, I will have the chance to collect all the illustrated achievements, get the signatures of all the members, and walk to the peak of life with antiques in my pocket? Kojiao Chi Fan. Wash up and go to sleep. Everything is possible in daydreams. While the salted fishes were boiling with excitement, the target of their envy was facing a test of life and death. Wei Si's hand that was holding the sword was very steady. The salted fish lucky queen did not dare to move, for fear that the other party's hand would slip and stab her. Big brother, let's sit down and talk. Don't play around with weapons. That's not in line with the core values of socialism. The salted fish lucky emperor knew his place. He knew that his address just now had offended Wei Si, so he could only change the way he addressed Wei Si with tears in his eyes. Wei Si did not listen to her explanation and answered Jiang Pingji's question. My lord, this person's behavior is impetuous, his words are frivolous, and his actions are also suspicious. Why don't we bring him down for interrogation? The salted fish lucky king could not help but shed 2 streams of tears. I've been a fan of you for so many years. As my idol, you actually treat your fans like this. Sad Kikyu Jiang Pengji dismounted from the horse and resisted the urge to smile. Forget it. He looks like a hunter who lives a hard life. Put away your sword first. Look, he's so scared that he's about to cry. Wei Si did as he was told and skillfully sheathed the snow-white sword. When the salted fish lucky queen saw this, she secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. She decided to take back her label of Wei Si as a weakling. Who are you? Jiang Pengji asked with a pleasant expression. The salted fish lucky queen's eyes darted around. When she saw the system's notification, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. I'm a hunter from the nearby mountains. Greetings, my lord. She stuttered as she spoke. Her posture of cupping her fists was also very awkward. Instead, she portrayed the image of a hunter who had not seen the world. Wei Si glanced at the books and luggage that she was carrying and said indifferently, a bunch of nonsense. This person's image was quite in line with the image of a hunter, but the things that he was carrying were not what a hunter should have. The salted fish lucky queen looked at Wei Si with a wronged expression. She was answering according to the system's notification. Could it be that the system was making fun of her? Wei Si asked, You said that you're a hunter. Then whose things do you have on you belong to? When the salted fish lucky queen heard Wei Si's question, she suddenly had the illusion that her heart was beating 70 beats per minute. If Jiang Pengji was not by her side, she really wanted to pounce on Wei Si and hug him. Even if she would be stabbed a few times by the other party, it would be worth it. Even if she died under a peony flower, she would still be a romantic ghost. I have these things. The salted fish lucky queen could not help but glance at the system's notification. After she saw it clearly, she almost cursed it out loud. At the same time, she blamed herself for being careless. Why? Because the luggage did not belong to this body at all. I picked up these luggage. The salted fish lucky queen stuttered. Her entire face looked even more aggrieved and pitiful, as if she was about to cry in the next second. I really picked them up. I saw that the luggage was on the ground and no one wanted it, so I took it. However, Wei Si said, picked up? There were not many households near Zhangjiang Pass. After the war started, the evacuation of the people was hastened. Now that it's in the wilderness, where did you pick up these things? Could it be that the nearby bandits were tempted by the wealth and killed to steal it? The salted fish lucky queen watched as Wei Si placed his right hand on the hilt of his sword. Her legs turned to jelly. Why did Beauty Si guess so accurately? Yes, this body was actually a bandit who made a living by robbing people. There were 6 other accomplices. Since the war started at Zhangjiang Pass, the 6 accomplices were afraid of Jiang Pengji's power and influence. They secretly moved to another place. Only this body could not leave because it had to take care of its elderly mother. Because there were no passers-by, the bandit had a hard time. He did not make any business for a few days. Yesterday, he met a sloppy refugee. He followed him with a hatchet in his hand. It happened to be raining heavily. The bandit and the refugee were fighting. He thought that he could kill the person in a few moves. He did not expect the other party to be so stubborn that he would rather die than let go. In desperation, the bandit chopped randomly with the hatchet a few times. The heavy rain quickly calmed his feverish mind. He realized that it was very likely that he had killed someone. He was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He turned to escape. The mountain road was rugged and it was raining heavily. The bandit lost his footing and rolled down the mountain. When he woke up the next day, he had already become the salted fish lucky queen. The system gave a brief introduction, but the salted fish lucky queen only saw that the body was that of a bandit. She killed someone. Wei Xi used a sword to scare her. She shivered and confessed everything. Wei Xi's face was livid. Jiang Pengji, who was standing 2 steps away from him, secretly facepalmed. She was sure that the salted fish lucky queen was a good girl. She would confess whatever Wei Xi lied to her. In a more complicated environment, she would not survive more than 2 episodes. Jiang Pengji even covered up for her and said that she was a hunter who lived nearby. So, you really killed someone to steal their wealth? Wei Xi's left thumb pushed against the sword's guard. The snow-white blade was slightly unsheathed. Chapter 1490. She thought she was lucky enough to meet 2 of her idols. She didn't expect Wei Xi, one of her idols, to want to kill her. Was she going to be the first unlucky person to die in the hands of her idols in the history of Dream of 1,000 Years? The more she thought about it, the sadder she felt. The more she thought about it, the more she wanted to cry. At the critical moment when her life was threatened, she cried herself hoarse. Wei Xi was speechless. This bandit was not tall, but his muscles were solid. He belonged to the short and capable type, and he had a ferocious appearance. He didn't expect that the honorable person, who could cure children's cries at night, would have a cowardly and weak heart. He only said a few words, and the other party actually cried. No matter how bad Jiang Pengji's temperament was, she would not deliberately humiliate someone who treated her sincerely. The lucky guy in front of her was even her fan. Zixiao, why don't you send someone to investigate the things he robbed? Even though he is a robber who has done many evil things, his filial piety is commendable. The law is nothing more than human feelings. If you really want to punish him, you have to let him settle down his old mother at home first. We can't let the old lady lose her son and have no one to take care of her. Jiang Pengji's voice was like the sound of heaven to the salted fish lucky guy's ears. What do you think? Wei Xi took 2 steps back and bowed. It's all up to you, my lord. The salted fish lucky guy heaved a sigh of relief. His eyes were as red as a rabbit's, inexplicably weakening his fierce temperament. Jiang Pengji said, I'll keep an eye on him. Zixiao, go and investigate. Let me know the results. Wei Xi disagreed. This person is a robber after all. What he does is murder and robbery. How can my lord be with him? Jiang Pengji smiled. If he had the ability to hurt me, he wouldn't just be a robber. After Wei Xi walked a few steps away, the salted fish lucky guy's expression instantly brightened. He lowered his voice and said, Streamer, you're amazing. She thought Wei Xi was a soft and cute scholar. She didn't expect to meet him face to face, only to find out that she was intimidated by Wei Xi's aura. Jiang Pengji said, You don't have to worry about your safety in the few hours you stay here. It was fine in the past. After all, the salted fish were far away from her. But now she was right under her nose, and they were near the battlefield of the 2 armies. If he left her to wander outside alone, who knew if she could survive for more than 12 hours? He should at least take care of her a little. It was just a short sentence, but the salted fish European king felt extremely comfortable and safe. Streamer, You're so nice. You're a good person. Her eyes were red as she said, if it weren't for Beauty Ci, I would really want to hug you. Jiang Pengji said coldly, you can't hug me when he's not here. Why? Ugly reject. Salted fish lucky king. Ing. While they were talking, Wei Ci walked over in a hurry, seeming to have lost his composure. In his hands were a few pieces of fine silk cloth. Master, look. Wei Ci handed the cloth to Jiang Pengji. She took it and unfolded it. She frowned slightly. On it was a drawing of the woodworking workshop's top secret. She gestured at salted fish with her peripheral vision and asked Wei Ci, Shizhong? Wei Ci shook his head. This person is definitely not Shizhong. He didn't have much interaction with Shizhong in his previous life, but he had met him twice in a hurry. If salted fish European king's body was really Shizhong's, there was no reason that Wei Ci couldn't recognize him the first time they met. In that case, the refugee he robbed last night was Shizhong. Jiang Pengji suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The possibility of this guess is very high, Wei Ci said calmly. Shizhong didn't have such experience in the past. Zhanjiang Pass is located at the border between the two countries. The atmosphere is chaotic and bandits are everywhere. He avoided detection and tried to cross the mountain. It's hard to guarantee that he won't encounter bandits who block the road and rob him. In a previous life and this life, everyone's fate had changed greatly. Shizhong was still as unlucky as ever. Jiang Pengji said, since I'm going to search the mountain, I want to see him alive or dead. Regardless of whether Shizhong was truly loyal to her, he had worked under her for a few years. Wasn't it a betrayal to betray his master now? She could tolerate the shortcomings of her subordinates, but she couldn't tolerate her subordinates betraying her. Traitors had to die. It's best if he's alive. I'll kill him myself. Salted fish European king interrupted and asked her, what if he's dead? Whip the corpse. You have a heavy taste. Wei Ci's face darkened and he scolded, don't be rude. Salted fish European king immediately became as quiet as a quail. She didn't even dare to look around. The real Beauty Ci was very different from the gentle gentleman she imagined. She felt pressured. Jiang Pengji heard her ridicule and laughed. Do you know? This is the difference between the original and my peers. Incisive. Salted fish gave Jiang Pengji a thumbs up. Human nature was complicated. People would show different faces to different people. Wei Ci was no exception. To friends, he was talkative and considerate. To outsiders, he was elegant and dignified. To his lord, he was loyal and devoted. To those who offended his lord, he naturally had a stern and angry side. The Wei Ci in Salted Fish's mind was based on the Wei Ci she saw in the streaming room. Naturally, it was different from reality. Wei Ci sent someone to search for Shizhong's corpse, but after searching the mountain, they only found a pool of blood and drops of blood scattered intermittently along the way. Shizhong wasn't hacked to death last night. After waking up, he hastily treated his wounds and left. Looking at the time, he's most likely at the Nye camp. Wei Ci said, when I sent people to search the mountain, the soldiers reported that there were obvious footprints nearby. The number of people was between 15 to 20. This group of people seemed to be looking for something, but they returned home when they couldn't find it. I boldly guessed that this group of people was led here by Shizhong. Most likely so. Jiang Pengji silently calculated the time in her heart and roughly reconstructed the process. The bandits slashed Shizhong randomly and thought that he was dead. In a hurry, they ran and fell down the mountain. In fact, Shizhong only fainted. When Shizhong woke up, he knew that he couldn't snatch the things from the bandits alone. He could only continue to climb the mountain and seek refuge in the Nye camp. Then, he would bring people to look for the bandits. Unexpectedly, the bandits were transmigrated by Lucky King. Lucky King mistakenly thought that the stolen things belonged to the bandits and brought them down mountain. If Lucky King didn't transmigrate or didn't take the things, these things would have been taken back by Shizhong. This speculation made sense. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, in that case, this bandit did a good deed. Salted Lucky King rushed to say, "Does this count as me atoning for my crime?" Wei Ci was noncommittal. Jiang Pengji took the opportunity to ask, "You can say so. Do you have any wishes?" Eh. Salted Lucky King's nerves were tense, and she suppressed her wildly beating heart. She had to think carefully about what she wanted. There was only one chance, so she couldn't make a hasty decision. After thinking about it, Salted Lucky King realized that she was also a greedy person. She actually wanted everything. In the end, she asked for everyone's autographs. Jiang Pengji took the initiative to give her a set of fashionable headwear for women. "I saw the bullet screen earlier. You seem to have mentioned that you're getting married soon. This is my gift." Salted Lucky King was stunned on the spot. Her cheeks were fluttering red. Chapter 1491. Thank you. The Lucky Queen suddenly became shy. She felt that it was the best gift she had ever received in her life. It made the wedding meaningful. "I wanted to have a Western-style wedding, but I've changed my mind. How am I supposed to send you the wedding photos?" "I don't think so," Jiang Pengji said frankly. "However, even if there are no wedding photos, I think you're definitely a very beautiful girl. You'll be the most beautiful bride on your wedding day. Also, I have to apologize to you for what happened to Zixiao. His behavior just now was due to his cautiousness and his protection of me. If he offended you, please don't take it to heart and forgive him." The Salted Lucky Queen blushed. She covered her face with her hands and said shyly, "Actually, it was my fault. I should be the one apologizing to Wei Ci. After all, that title was offensive to him. Nothing has happened yet, and I'm not hurt. Streamer, I realize that you're better than I thought. If not for the fact that you're a girl, I really want to replace the groom." The last sentence was what she wanted to say. The streamer was warm, flirtatious, handsome, beautiful, and responsible. Fortunately, she was a girl. If she was a guy, she would really want to kick her fiancé. I've heard similar words many times before. Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily. "Fortunately, I can fight. Otherwise, I would have been beaten to death by the group. You don't have enough charm, but you still beat your rival in love. Isn't this indirectly admitting that you're inferior to your rival in love?" The Salted Lucky Queen shook her head. After a while, she changed the topic. "I suddenly thought of something. Others will be jealous of you for giving me such a precious gift." Jiang Pengji glanced at the bullet screen in the streaming room and told the salted fish with a heavy expression, "They're making a scene. All of them are envious, jealous, and hateful. Some even plan to send you a knife." The Salted Lucky Queen was very optimistic. "This is great. I can open a knife shop without having to purchase goods." Jiang Pengji had a very good impression of the optimistic salted fish. However, because of her identity, she could not pay too much attention to him. Jiang Pengji ordered someone to prepare a delicious meal for the salted fish. She calculated the time, and it was time to go back after she finished eating. The food in the army was not very good, but the salted fish European king still finished his meal. He returned to his own world with a set of accessories and gifts from his idols. Jiang Pengji didn't have the energy to care about how salted fish was doing at the moment. How is Shi Zhong's memory? Since he has a photographic memory, even if he doesn't have the blueprint, he should be able to write it down, right? Although they had recovered the blueprint, Shi Zhong had run back to the Nye camp. Leaving this person alive would ultimately be a scourge. You don't have to worry too much about this. Let's not talk about whether or not Shi Zhong can restore the contents of the blueprint. Even if he can, how long will it take to mass produce them? See, I had just sent someone to interrogate the robber, and the robber confessed everything out of fear. He said that he had cut Shi Zhong's hand, cheek, collarbone, and shoulder. With such injuries, even if he didn't die, he would still be half dead. If the injuries were any deeper, it was difficult for him to even hold a brush. So how could he draw a fine picture? Jiang Pengji felt better after hearing that. On second thought, she was suddenly curious about Niao Yang's reaction. Shi Zhong, the chess piece, was completely useless. He went for wool and came home shorn. Even if Shi Zhong wasn't sent by Niao Yang, he was most likely very depressed. Just as Jiang Pengji had guessed, Niao Yang was indeed very depressed at the moment. If he hadn't restrained his temper, he would probably have flown into a rage. Wei Yong said apologetically, I didn't do my job well. If I had been more cautious and sent someone to receive him earlier, perhaps. Niao Yang interrupted him and sighed his heart. Forget it. Even God is helping Lu Shi. What can we do? Shi Zhong didn't meet anyone who was pursuing him along the way, but he just had to meet a robber when he was crossing the mountain. I have to say, maybe this is fate. When luck was good, everything went smoothly. When luck was bad, even a sip of herbal tea would get stuck in one's teeth. Wei Yong blamed himself incessantly. This matter was his fault. If he had been more cautious and sent someone to receive Shi Zhong, it might have been a different situation. Niao Yang asked again, how is Shi Zhong's injury now? He remembered that Zi Shun had said that Shi Zhong had a photographic memory. It didn't matter if the drawing was lost. He could still write it down if he was alive. Wei Yong sighed softly. Not very good. The military doctor said that his right hand was cut by a hatchet. He won't be able to write for a while. The wound on his cheek is too deep. His left eye can't be saved. The wound on his left shoulder has spread to his collarbone. It's not easy to heal, and it's very easy to rupture. It had to be said that it was a miracle that Shi Zhong could come back alive. He had the heart, but not the strength for other matters. Niao Yang was silent for a long time. However, the two of them didn't know Shi Zhong's determination to climb up. If he couldn't write with his right hand, he would use his left hand. If his left eye was blind, he would only keep his right eye open. If he couldn't move the wound on his shoulder, he would lie down and draw. He had endured humiliation for so many years before he finally got the perfect opportunity to be promoted. How could he give up halfway? In fact, during the years he was undercover in the woodworking workshop, he had thought of defecting. However, the idea didn't last long. After all, the woodworking workshop was a low-level government office. Even if Jiang Pengji attached great importance to it, the people inside almost didn't participate in politics. Zhang Ping, one of the three heads of the woodworking workshop, had worked there for 2 years, but that was because Jiang Pengji was short of talents. Zhang Ping and the others enjoyed excellent treatment, but they didn't have any real power. Or rather, the woodworking workshop was a department that didn't have any power. If Shi Zhong stayed there, no matter how hard he tried, he could only climb to the position of Zhang Ping and the others. Without real power, what was the point of having a high position? However, Shi Zhong was right-handed. He couldn't use his left hand to write. How could he draw exquisite and detailed drawings? He didn't make any progress for a few days. At that moment, Jiang Pengji had finished reorganizing. Several batches of supplies arrived one after another. It's not a solution to always be in a deadlock. We have to find a way to break through, Qiguan Rang said. Niao Yang refused to accept the challenge for several days. This is the 4th time he has put up a no-challenge sign. Even though Niao Yang had put up a no-challenge sign, Jiang Pengji could still fight if she wanted to. However, they were holed up in the camp. There were more than 200,000 troops in the camp. Jiang Pengji still had to defend Zhanjiang Pass. It was impossible for her to attack with all her might. Therefore, she could only watch helplessly when they put up a no-challenge sign. There are only 2 ways to deal with such a situation. First, find trouble with them. Second, if there's no trouble, then create trouble. Qiguan Rang glanced at his lord from the corner of his eyes. She was the one with the most crooked ideas. Someone suggested, why don't we try to lead the troops to attack at night? Jiang Pengji said, 80,000 people to sneak attack a camp with more than 200,000 troops? If we can't hurt them, we can only let them have a good dream. This idea was too bad. However, let them have a good dream? Niao Yang was now patient. He probably couldn't stand the torment. Bai Ning said, I have an idea. Jiang Pengji said, tell me about it. Chapter 1492. Bai Ning wasn't the only one who wanted to make a contribution. The 5 million salted fish in the streaming room also wanted to join in. Pulsation activation. Come up with a plan to build up your character and beg for an adventure called Dream of 1,000 Years. I want to be a top scholar. After searching for a long time, I suddenly saw the content of General Tian Dan of Qi setting up the Flaming Bull formation during the Warring States period. I think it's possible. Does the streamer want to get 1,000 bulls to give it a try? Tie a knife to the bull's horns, tie hay to their tails, and ignite it, then charge at the enemy's camp. Todo facio. Save it, don't come up with a bad idea. If you want to use this idea to build up your character, I'm afraid you won't have any adventure in your next life. The big boss is a big boss. He has the demeanor of a master when he speaks. Guokai guo fengxiyo. The flaming bull formation sounds awesome, but it's actually very unlikely. If I remember correctly, during the Civil War before the founding of the People's Republic, both parties tried the flaming bull formation, but it didn't work because the frightened bulls wouldn't charge at the enemy. Tie a knife to a bull's horn? Be careful not to stab your own people. The flaming bull formation? It's better to make a bull formation. It's more feasible. After all, animals can't understand human language, and it's impossible for them to obey orders like soldiers. Although there are records of the flaming bull formation in history, history can't be completely trusted. The practical difficulty has to be considered. If one plan doesn't work, another plan comes up. Shuli Jichio. If the flaming bull formation doesn't work, then we can learn from Wife Chow and attack Crow's Nest at night in the classic Battle of Guandu. The streamer sends troops to attack their logistics granary. As long as they burn all their food, the battle will be easy. In Yueja Juga Chinmo. Hehe. Do you know where Niel Yang's logistics granary is? The salted fish are so eager to come up with a plan, only because Jiang Pingji's gift to the lucky emperor made them collectively explode. That lucky emperor was extremely lucky. If he had the treatment of a 5 million lottery winner, the other lucky emperors only had $5 at most. It's infuriating to compare. The lucky emperor hasn't held a wedding yet, but he's already released his wedding photos online. He spent a high price to buy custom-made fabric and hired a professional tailor to customize his wedding dress. It's a perfect imitation of Lu Zhao's wedding dress. There are more than 20 pieces of headgear scattered. When he wears all of them and puts on his wedding dress and makeup, everyone is envious. The lucky king added another sentence. This will be a family heirloom in the future. It will be passed down to the daughter and not the son. I hope that the daughter in the future will also be beautiful. The European emperor posted a photo of the salted fish downstairs, acknowledging his mother-in-law. Because of this lucky emperor's fortuitous encounter, the salted fish were even more enthusiastic about Dream of 1,000 Years. It was unknown who said that speaking more in the live broadcast room could increase the chance of winning a prize, but the number of bullet screens had doubled in the past few days. The salted fishes tried their best to come up with suggestions, but Jiang Pengji did not accept any of them. Ning's suggestions were somewhat feasible. Everyone discussed and came up with a rough battle plan. As the saying goes, if the mountain is not me, then I will be the mountain. So what if Nielyang keeps hiding? Since a frontal battle during the day would not be able to inflict serious damage on them, they could only try to do so at night. Jiang Pingji had initially rejected the idea of attacking at night, but after Bai Ning's improvement, attacking at night was not a bad idea. As everyone knew, before Bai Ning followed Jiang Pingji, he was in the firecracker business. His ancestral skills were very reliable. Therefore, that night, the Nye camp was still peaceful. The patrolling soldiers handed over their shifts as usual. The bonfire outside the camp occasionally made 1 or 2 crackles. Because Nielyang was not feeling well, Nye Qing took the initiative to take on the trivial military affairs. He tried his best to help his father share the burden. Occasionally, he would ask his father-in-law, Wei Dan, for help when there was something he did not understand. With Wei Dan's careful guidance, Nye Qing was a smart person who could understand with a little guidance. He quickly got the hang of it. He was busy, but Nielyang was still idle. I really don't know what you're afraid of. Do you really not trust me? Nye Qing knew the reason why Nielyang was unwilling to get involved in military affairs. It was because Nielyang was the legitimate grandson of the 3rd branch. Nielyang, who was in power in the Nye family, was the eldest legitimate son of the 5th branch. Nielyang was worried that if he got involved in too much military power, he would arouse Nielyang's suspicion and dislike. After all, the internal conflicts in the Nye family were quite deep. Old Master Nye refused to admit his old age. Everyone felt that they were qualified to be in charge of the Nye family, so they disliked each other. Thinking of this, Nye Qing could not help but chuckle. Although he and Nye Yang were cousins, their relationship was better than that of real brothers. How could he be so suspicious of his own brother? Nye Yang lazily turned over. He said, "That's not it. This little brother is mediocre and untalented. It's better not to cause trouble for elder brother." Nye Qing moved the lamp closer and struggled to read through the scrolls with slightly sore eyes. When he finished processing a batch, he saw Nye Yang finish 2 plates of pastries from the corner of his eye. He shook his head helplessly. "Don't eat too much at night. It's easy to get indigestion and nausea. How old are you? You don't even notice this." Nye Qing was about to nag again. Nye Yang's heart thumped. He mentally prepared himself to be chanted. Nye Qing was good, but he was too involved. This made him feel uncomfortable. As they spoke, a burst of hurried footsteps came from outside the tent. Reporting, Nye Qing said, "What is it?" The messenger said, "Enemy figures have been discovered in the southeast barracks." In an instant, the words "night attack" appeared in Nye Qing and Nye Qing's minds. "Send orders everywhere to guard against the enemy." Nye Qing asked again, "How many enemies are there?" Of course, the messenger did not know. However, he was sure that the enemy was not large. There were no more than 1,000 of them. A night attack of 1,000 was not enough for the Nye camp, which had more than 200,000 soldiers. What can 1,000 men do? Not to mention that they were discovered by our army. Rather than saying it was a night attack, it's more like seeking death. Nye Yang pretended to analyze in surprise. He then guessed, "Elder brother, maybe the enemy has other troops. Are they trying to create a diversion?" Even though he hated the system to the core, he had to admit that having such a thing was equivalent to having a clairvoyant and clairvoyant. According to the feedback from the system, the enemy had 3,000 men. They were split into 3 groups of 1,000 men each. The troop that the messenger reported might have been a fog bomb to attract their attention. The enemy still had a backup plan. Nye Qing said solemnly, "This matter needs to be reported immediately. We cannot delay it." He had just stepped out of the tent when he noticed a fire burning in a certain direction. The enemy had attacked. Before he could finish thinking, there was a series of firecrackers exploding in another direction. As if to cater to these 2 changes, there was another ambush. The enemy shot hundreds of fire arrows into the Nye camp. When Wei Yong heard the news, he was so angry he almost cursed. What are the night patrols doing? How is it that the enemy is less than 50 zhang away from the camp without being discovered? The range of arrows was limited. Even the longer-range crossbows had to be close enough to shoot the fire arrows into the camp. Wei Yong wanted to vomit blood, but he did not discover them at such a close distance. The soldiers guarding the perimeter of the camp also felt wronged. Chapter 1493. Although it was called a night attack, it was actually a harassment from time to time. They would make a big fuss about an imminent attack, and when the enemy sent reinforcements, the soldiers would slip away quietly. What was this like? It was like a long foreplay was done, and there was a feeling, but it ended up withering. They did not just harass once, but 5 or 6 times in one night. It was not until the sky was faintly gray that the enemy returned home. That night, almost no one in the Nye camp could sleep well. It was not because of the large number of enemies, but because the enemy was too elusive. Every time they appeared, there would be no warning, and the moment they appeared, they would launch a wave of rockets. However, the people of the Nye camp did not dare to let down their guard. Who knew if this teasing would be real next time? The next day, the sky was bright, and rumors were flying among the soldiers. You slept like a log last night, and you don't know what happened. Lu Shi's army suddenly appeared out of thin air, and when we caught up, they disappeared again. Not long after, they appeared in another place. Could it be that these people are celestial soldiers and generals? That's strange. When the soldiers ate, they gathered together and whispered, not daring to speak loudly. The Nye camp was strict in managing the army, and any speech that shook the morale of the soldiers was not allowed. Once caught, the lightest punishment would be a lesson, and the heaviest punishment would be military law to warn others. No one disliked their long lives, and under normal circumstances, they did not dare to talk about it everywhere. However, what happened yesterday was too strange. While the soldiers were anxious, they urgently needed a sense of security from their comrades, so there were soldiers whispering about it everywhere. Maybe they really are celestial soldiers and generals. I just heard someone say that they saw them flying down from the sky with their own eyes. No, they clearly came out from the ground. I heard that Lu Shi's men are all ghost soldiers. Rumors always became more and more exaggerated as they spread. With each additional person, the rumor would become less true. At first, people were still talking about the strange appearance of the enemy last night, but as the rumor spread, it became that the enemy flew down from the sky, drilled out from the ground, and the enemy who attacked at night were all ghost soldiers. What was even more amazing was that there were actually a few people who swore that they saw it with their own eyes. Not only did some people see it with their own eyes, but some people also found supporting evidence. If Lu Shi wasn't the King Yinluo of Hell, why would she be so bloodthirsty? I heard that every time she returned from a great victory, she would have thousands of human ears strung around her waist and human heads on her horse's back. Every day, she drinks human blood and eats human flesh. Wherever she goes, she kills. Isn't she a living Hades? No. It's not King Yinluo. It's most likely a general in the sky. Say the last time the Lord went to burn Zhangjiang Pass, the fire was clearly so big that it couldn't be put out, but the heavens actually rained. It's most likely a general who went to look for the Dragon King. That's why it rained. Some said that Jiang Pengji was a general with a powerful background in the Heavenly Palace, while others said that she was a Rakshasa demon from hell. Otherwise, why would the enemy appear without a sound last night and leave without a trace? Who in this world could do this? It was either a god or a ghost. At noon, these messy rumors reached Niel Yang's ears, and Wei Yong and the others all apologized. They also dealt with the few who spread the worst rumors and managed to suppress the signs, but it was better to disperse them than to stop them. The more they suppressed them, the more anxious the soldiers became. Niel Yang could see it clearly. No matter how Jiang Pengji approached them quietly, the enemy's purpose of the night attack was nothing more than to force him to fight. Send someone to pay attention. She will come again tonight. Tell the soldiers not to be careless. The enemy was obviously harassing them and would not give up until they achieved their goal. Wei Yong and the others agreed, but they were a little worried. No matter how the low-level soldiers spread rumors, it indirectly proved one thing. The enemy was indeed elusive. If they did not think of a way to expose the enemy's tricks, the rumors would only become more and more intense, which was extremely disadvantageous to them. It turned out that the celestial soldiers and ghost generals were all fake. The real reason for their elusive appearance was disguise. During the sneak attack last night, there was only a small crescent moon in the sky, and it was even covered by dark clouds. The soldiers wore an ancient version of a ghillie suit for camouflage. Their exposed skin was smeared with charcoal, and they basically blended in with the night. Because of insufficient nutrition, the ancient soldiers had an extremely high rate of night blindness. Even if they did not have night blindness, they more or less had other problems. It was difficult for the soldiers standing on the watchtower to discover the small movements in the distance, let alone to warn them in advance. This was the real reason why Jiang Pengji's soldiers were elusive. In the middle of the night, Jiang Pengji sent people to sneak attack again. This time, the number of troops was greater than the previous night. She was eager to let the entire enemy camp know. There was a hot-tempered general in Niel Yang's tent, and he directly asked for the order to send troops. When he went out and chased for a mile, there was not even a shadow of the enemy. At that moment, there was the sound of firecrackers exploding in another place. The loud noise could be heard from afar. Jiang Pengji squatted in the distance and watched the movement. She asked Bai Ning, "General Bai's ancestors ran a firecracker business?" Bai Ning did not feel ashamed. "It's an old skill passed down from my ancestors. Unfortunately, in troubled times, the people can't even feed themselves. How can they have the mood to play with these things? Because the ancestral business could not continue, Bai Ning could only find another way out. His daughter also had to get married. He had to climb a little higher in order to find a husband of a higher level for her. Jiang Pengji asked, General Bai, do you have any thoughts? Bai Ning was dumbfounded. What thoughts could he have? Could it be that the Lord was asking about his employment intentions after retirement? After the troubled times end, I can't carry a sword anymore. Maybe I'll pick up my old profession. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, I'm not asking about that. I'm asking, General Bai, you have this skill. Why didn't you think of continuing to study it? Bai Ning was puzzled. What's the use of studying firecrackers? The people can't afford them. Jiang Pengji was helpless. She guided him and said, Can a piece of firecracker blow up a clay pot? Bai Ning nodded affirmatively. Yes. She asked again, If 100 pieces of firecrackers are gathered together, won't it be more powerful? Maybe it can even blow up the city gate. Bai Ning was speechless. This was something that would make people happy during the new year. Did his lord only think about killing people and fighting wars? Let's set off firecrackers. That's possible, but the battlefield is chaotic. The enemy's rockets ignite the firecrackers first. Won't they blow up our own people? If 100 pieces of firecrackers were gathered together, the volume would be huge. The target would be too obvious. The feasibility was very low. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, Then let's change our thinking. If after studying it, the power of a piece of firecracker can match up to 100 pieces, what do you think? Bai Ning was silent for a while. He felt that his lord was indulging in fantasy. How could the power of a piece of firecracker be compared to 100 pieces? Was it possible to compress hundreds of parts of sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal into one? More than 200 years ago, firecrackers only burned bamboo. Later, people discovered the magical effects of sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal. They simply filled these things in a bamboo tube according to a certain proportion and burned them. They were also called firecrackers. Bai Ning's ancestral skill, to put it bluntly, was a proportional formula. If firecrackers were made according to this formula, the explosion would be loud and the production process would be less prone to accidents. My lord's idea is interesting. Chapter 1494. Jiang Pengji could also see that Bai Ning did not take this matter to heart at all. However, this reaction was normal. After all, in Bai Ning's mind, firecrackers were toys that children played with during the new year. If such a toy could really play a role on the battlefield, it would be as ridiculous as someone telling Jiang Pengji that a child's toy gun could destroy a planet with one shot. Besides, firecrackers were so capable. Why hadn't the ancestors discovered it? She smiled and said, Interesting ideas are the key to innovation. How can you climb higher if you blindly believe in the things of the predecessors? So what if it was whimsical? Since ancient times, how many epic-making inventions had not been derived from whimsical ideas? Bai Ning secretly shook his head when he heard this. Sometimes he wondered what kind of person the Lord he followed was. She had the ambition to pacify the world and end the chaos. She should be a broad-minded leader who cared about the people's livelihood. In this aspect, she did a good job. No, it should be said that she did a good job in every aspect, so much so that people had doubts about her identity. Was she a simple politician, a wise monarch, a brave general, or a whimsical Maha's child? No matter which identity it was, Bai Ning could not feel a trace of disgust or disgust. Instead, he would be led by the nose by her thoughts. If my lord finds it interesting, you might as well send someone to try it out. I have a pen passed down from my ancestors and my family. Maybe it will come in handy. Bai Ning was not optimistic in his heart, but he would not directly refute her on the surface. Instead, he would go along with her wishes. After all, he was a feudal lord who had power over the world. Naturally, he had the right to whimsical ideas. Whatever she wanted to do, there would always be people who would be willing to sacrifice their lives for her, put it into practice for her, and please her. Jiang Pengji shook her head. It's not necessary at the moment. Let's wait until the world is pacified. Even the most primitive explosives were subversive to the changes in the form of war in this era. Jiang Pengji did not want to create another Shi Zhong who stole secrets. This kind of weapon should be used only when she had the ability to protect it to prevent it from falling into the hands of other forces. Bai Ning nodded and said no more. Jiang Pengji said, "Maybe I should talk to Yuexia about this. She will most likely be very interested." Bai Ning laughed. "That's true. Yuexia's favorite thing to do is to make the impossible possible. She's too competitive." As a father, how could Bai Ning not know that his daughter, Bai Yuexia, had suffered discrimination and verbal abuse because of the birthmark on her face? When she had just reached adulthood, there were a few Icemen who came to propose marriage. However, the ones who proposed were all local hooligans and scoundrels. One of them was even an old widower who was over 70 years old. Although he was old, his heart was not old. Bai Ning was furious, and Bai Yuexia was so angry that she chased Icemen out. Some Icemen ran away with their tails between their legs, and some Icemen had a hot and sharp temper. They directly said that Bai Yuexia was ugly, and marrying a rascal with such a condition would be too much. After this village, even if she wanted to marry in the future, she wouldn't be able to get married in this lifetime. "Father, if my future husband isn't a hero that I like, I'd rather comb my hair and be a widow for the rest of my life than marry." His daughter had such a fiery temper. As a father, what else could Bai Ning do other than protect her? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "If one day I can conquer the world and establish a country, Yuexia's achievements will definitely be above yours." Bai Ning was elated when he heard that. What did this mean? It meant that the Lord didn't mind Bai Yuexia's crime of not guarding well at all. Not only did she not intend to punish her, but she also wanted to put her in an important position. He was overjoyed in his heart, but he put on a serious expression on his face. Yuexia is just a girl in the boudoir. How would I dare to think so much? As soon as he said that, Bai Ning couldn't help but slap himself in his heart. How could he say that? Didn't he see that his Lord was also a woman? "I'm also a woman, but I also dare to think about the whole world." Jiang Pengji didn't blame him for being the stupidest. She smiled and said, "The words male and female are just to distinguish between genders. It doesn't represent an individual's ability. Belittling someone because of their gender, you're not qualified as a father." Bai Ning smiled sheepishly and echoed, "You're right, my lord. I will pay attention in the future." While they were talking, the troops who launched sneak attacks and harassed them had already stirred up trouble everywhere in the Nye camp, making them restless for the whole night. Jiang Pengji said, "If this goes on, I don't think the possibility of Nye Liang sending his troops is high. That person is very patient." When Bai Ning heard that the topic was back to business, he immediately said seriously, "It doesn't matter if he doesn't send his troops. We'll continue to cause trouble. If he's not afraid of the morale of the troops collapsing, then we'll continue to endure. 1,000-year tortoise, a 10,000-year tortoise. If he can really endure anything, I'll admire him." If they didn't fight and just harass them, sooner or later, they would break down. All the soldiers in the Nye camp were living people made of flesh and blood. They weren't dead people who didn't eat or drink. It was fine if they didn't sleep well for 1 or 2 days, but if they were like this for several days in a row, it would only be a matter of time before they became mentally exhausted and their combat power would decline. Moreover, if they harass them too much, they'll know that our army is bluffing. They'll inevitably let down their guard. Bai Ning had a good grasp of this. Although he didn't have much experience in leading troops, when he was in his hometown in Nansheng, he was still the head of the local militia. He relied on various tactics to protect the land from foreign enemies. No matter how cautious Nye Liang is and how patient he is, the soldiers under him are just fools. Nye Liang could maintain a high level of vigilance from beginning to end, but the soldiers under him couldn't. There were too many stories about the wolf coming. When the wolf really came, people would not believe it anymore. Bai Ning didn't know the story of the wolf is coming, but he knew how to wear down the enemy's vigilance bit by bit. Jiang Pengji said, "I'm just afraid that we'll repeat the same trick too many times and be seen through." No matter how stupid the enemy was, they couldn't fall into the same trap repeatedly. Bai Ning seriously considered this problem. He decided to attack the Nye camp the night after tomorrow. After harassing the enemy camp for 3 consecutive nights, the enemy would be mentally exhausted. The 4th night attack would definitely be effective. The next day, Jiang Pingji came over to challenge them, as usual. Nye Ying and the others were about to go crazy with anger. Fan Chun said angrily, "What's wrong with Lu Shi? She's causing trouble in the middle of the night and causing trouble in the day. Does she have too much energy and nowhere to vent it?" Attacking at night did not let them sleep, and challenging them in the day did not let them have a good rest. Wei Yong said, "It's obvious that she's forcing us to fight." Fan Chun said, "Let's fight then. Are we afraid of her?" Although Nye Qing was still young, he knew his father's considerations and volunteered to hold the fort. Nye Liang frowned and thought for a while, then said, "If that's the case, then let's send them away." He didn't want to fight not only because of his health, but also because Jiang Pengji was too strange. The consecutive coincidences had shaken the morale of the army. Before finding the perfect opportunity, Nye Liang didn't want to take the risk and let Jiang Pengji take advantage of him. Chapter 1495. Hey, they're finally willing to come out. I thought they secretly escaped. He had challenged them for so many days, but they didn't respond. He thought they would stand him up that day. He didn't expect to be surprised. You don't know. A tortoise's head has been in its shell for a long time. Doesn't it need to come out to look for food? The soldiers around him roared with laughter. Their mocking malice was written all over their faces. The general's voice wasn't soft, but the 2 armies were separated by a long distance. They could only vaguely hear a little movement. Even if they didn't hear it clearly, they knew it wouldn't be pleasant just by looking at how the enemy was laughing. Jiang Pengji yawned while riding on the horse. She said in a bored tone, "Is this another sign of a general duel?" She really didn't understand the etiquette of ancient battles. It was fine if the 2 armies didn't kill the envoys, but there was a general duel. In her opinion, while the Nye army's formation was unstable, she could directly lead her troops to attack. A general duel would give the enemy time to prepare. Of course, a general duel was not very frequent. It was generally limited to the battlefield. According to the current situation of war, there might not be a general duel in 100 or 200 years. Bai Ning volunteered to go. Jiang Pengji waved her hand and gestured for him to go. "I'll hold the line for you." She wasn't bragging, but she had never lost a one-on-one in this world. There's another reward for killing the enemy's general in front of the battle. Bai Ning cupped his hands and accepted the order. He spurred his horse forward. The general from the Nye army was Bai Ning, who was over 40 years old. His hair and beard were already white. He was contemptuous and angry at the same time. Could it be that Jiang Pengji had no capable generals under her command and had only sent an old and weak general? It's good that Lu Shi is so contemptuous. I'll go meet him. There were many generals in the Nye army. Many of them were from Zhongzhao's military families. They had practiced martial arts since they were young and were very brave. Except for a few experienced veterans, most of them were between 25 and 40 years old. They were in their prime. Is there no one else in Lu Shi's camp? He actually sent such an old man. He's obviously here to die. Who are you? Tell me your name. My blade does not behead a nameless person. The 2 of them were dozens of feet apart, but his voice was like thunder, and every word could be heard clearly. The newcomer was tall and sturdy, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. His arms were as thick as an ordinary woman's thighs. His muscles were solid, and he stood out from the crowd. His attire was quite stylish, and one could tell at a glance that he was a high-ranking general in Nye Ying's army. A full set of armor made of fine iron. The armor was painted with ferocious and frightening beasts. Just by standing there, this person gave people a chilling feeling. In his hand was a long saber that was 3 meters long. The edge of the saber was cold and intimidating. The horse he was riding on wasn't small, but when this general rode on it, the war horse seemed petite. In the face of such humiliation, Bai Ning laughed in anger. Such big words. Aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue? If you still want your father's life, get off your horse kneel down and call me father." Hearing Bai Ning refer to himself as his father, General Nie Ying's chest burned with anger. He raised his sword and urged his horse forward. In a single exchange, both of them used their full strength. The strength was so great that the hand between his thumb and forefinger felt numb. The general was shocked. He was surprised by Bai Ning's strength. He was clearly an old man whose health was declining, but his strength was not inferior to that of a young man. That was because although Bai Ning was old, his physical condition was maintained very well. Before he joined Jiang Pengji's side, he had even killed a man-eating female worm with his bare hands. It was not a good habit to judge people by their appearance. Bai Ning felt that he could still fight for more than 10 years. "Oh, my son is not an embroidered pillow. I am very relieved." Bai Ning took advantage of his age and called the other party his son. He urged his horse to fight while he was talking nonsense to disturb the other party's condition. "Young man, let me teach you a good lesson. Warriors born into a family of generals had advantages, but also certain disadvantages. The advantage was that they could receive formal and systematic education from a young age. They were far from those generals born into the wilderness who only had brute force. The disadvantages were also obvious. No matter how crude a scolding fight was, it could not be compared to an unorthodox one. Bai Ning's martial arts and military tactics were taught by Gu Chun, the former Huban general of Nanxing. Although it was not considered unorthodox, it was indeed not orthodox. He could not guarantee that he would win in a fight, but he definitely could not lose in a scolding fight. The general wanted to deal with the enemy carefully, but the more Bai Ning talked, the angrier he became. In the end, he could not hold in anymore. "You're courting death." With a loud shout, he attacked Bai Ning's face with his long knife. Bai Ning seemed to have expected it. He blocked the attack with his weapon and bent over to avoid it. The two of them fought for more than 10 rounds. Their foreheads, which were wrapped in armor, were dripping with sweat. The clothes inside the armor were wet with hot sweat. Sun Wen frowned and asked Jiang Pengji, "Can you tell who has the upper hand, my lord?" Jiang Pengji said, "Of course it's General Bai Ning. He is more experienced and knows how to preserve his strength and wait for an opportunity to strike. Nie Ying is a good general, but he is young and arrogant. It's inevitable that he will be arrogant. In another 10 rounds, the outcome will be more or less decided." As she spoke, the situation in front of the army was as she expected. General Nie Ying's experience was not as good as Bai Ning's. He was deceived and revealed a flaw. His shoulder was cut. While he was in pain, he made a feint. While Bai Ning was dodging, he urged his horse to rush back to his army. Of course, Bai Ning did not want to lose the military merit that was already in his mouth. He hurriedly urged his horse to catch up. He caught a glimpse of a cold reflection from the corner of his eye. He thought to himself, "This is bad. Is Nie Jun trying to shoot an arrow from the back in broad daylight?" Bai Ning was vigilant as he caught up with his opponent. He raised his knife and cut him in half. The enemy did not even have the chance to scream before he fell off his horse. In the blink of an eye, the arrow was already in front of him. Bai Ning dodged sideways. The arrow pierced through his arm. He immediately rushed back to his camp. At the same time, Nie Qing's face darkened. He did not know whether to reprimand the general who lost his life due to carelessness or to reprimand the young general who shot an arrow from the back. Life and death were not important in a battle between generals. People would only look down on those dirty tricks that could not be seen in the light. It was fine to shoot an arrow from the back, but not only did he not save his own general, he even let the enemy escape successfully. It was even more humiliating. When Qin Gong saw that Bai Ning had returned, his stern face was filled with anger. "Is General Bai all right? What haven't I seen before?" Bai Ning grinned. "It's just an arrow from the back. I suffered some flesh wounds. It's a pity that my head is gone." Killing an enemy general in front of a battle was a great merit. As a trophy, the other party's head was his. Qin Gong did not know whether to laugh or cry. At that moment, he was still concerned about the enemy general's head. General Bai really did not know what to say. Chapter 1496. Bai Ning coughed softly and didn't dare to talk back. He could only listen to his lord's reprimand. Sun Wen came out to smooth things over and appease his lord, lest she get angry and take the initiative to fight. Jiang Pengji fought alone in the battle of the northern borderline, which still left an indelible psychological shadow in Sun Wen's heart. At that moment, another general came out from Ye Ying's side. The general who had been cut in half had been picked up by the soldiers to collect his body. Qin Gong volunteered to fight. "Why are you here? Tell that old man to come out and die." Qin Gong was very good-looking. His only flaw was a long scar on the right side of his face. The location of the scar was very close to his right eye. The scar was left by an arrow when Han Yu ambushed him at Sanshan Valley. If the location was a little more off, it would have either pierced through his brain or blinded his right eye. Who would have thought that one day, Han Yu would become a comrade in the same camp as them? You guys are so shameless. Not only did you sneak an arrow in the dark, but you even said that you want to fight with the injured General Bai. Qin Gong said coldly. A big knife stood in front of him. He said, "If you want to find General Bai, you have to go through me. I'm afraid you won't be able to." As mentioned earlier, most of the generals in Ye Ying's tent came from families of generals. Unlike Dongqing, which valued literature and restrained martial arts, Zhongzhou was full of martial arts. There were many families of generals, and each of them was a big family. The unlucky guy who had been killed by Bai Ning was a cousin of the general in front of him, similar to Xie and Li Yin. The two had a good relationship in private. He couldn't bear to see his cousin being hunted down and cut in half at the waist. The sound of the war drums resounded in the sky. Qin Gong didn't talk nonsense and went forward to fight. "Good timing. I'll take your head." Jiang Pengji continued to watch the battle and yawned. White snorted in dissatisfaction. Both the human and the horse were very unhappy. Sun Wen saw her like this and took the initiative to start conversation. He couldn't let his lord continue yawning. Such a lazy and inattentive look would be seen as not taking them seriously in the eyes of the generals who risked their lives for her. Qin Gong was fighting with his life on the front line, and his lord was squatting in the back, yawning and squeezing tears. "Lord, do you think General Qin has a chance of winning?" Jiang Pengji said, "Of course we have a chance of winning, but overall, the enemy has a slight advantage." Suddenly, my eyes turned red. Zhongzhou is indeed a place where outstanding people are born. The Nie family is also a wealthy family among the wealthy. Any general you can pick out is capable. When watching a general fight, the first thing to look at was his aura, figure, and muscles. The poor study literature, the rich practice martial arts. Although books were very expensive in this era, the cost of training a qualified general was no less than that of training a great scholar. To be a general, not only did he need to have an excellent body and talent, he also needed to study military books, buy all kinds of equipment, and take care of his body was also a huge expense. Fish and meat could not be missed. How could a martial artist be so strong when he had to eat plain vegetables and porridge all day long? If his muscles and bones were damaged, he would need to use herbs to nurse them back to health. How could an ordinary family provide these conditions? There were some boorish men who were born with divine strength, who climbed up by relying on their strength, but their height was limited, and they could not become generals. Among the generals under Jiang Pengji, except for Yin who came from a grassroots background, which one of the others did not have a certain background. Meng Hun first followed the Meng family in Sangzhou and was a general of the Meng family. He suffered when he was young, but after he climbed up, the resources came. Luo Yu was the coach of the Imperial Guards in Dongqing, and his family also had a background. Li Yin grew up with Xie Qian. No matter how hard Xie Qian lived, how could he let his son lack resources? Fu Wang was a boorish man who grew up in a pack of wolves. He followed his adoptive father, Fu Yang, when he was young, and could be considered half a son of a general. Xie was born in the Xie family, and Qin Gong's father's family had worked hard for the Su family for generations. Both of them were good seedlings. When Jiang Nongqin first learned martial arts, Jiang Pengji invested a lot. After Jiang Pengji's power stabilized, she promoted many young generals, but they were still inexperienced and could not compare to the children of a general. Counting the generals under her command, There were not many who were trained by herself. Those who could be used were basically ready-made ones from other families. I'm so envious. The rich Nief family did not have to spend much effort to recruit so many good seedlings. It was infuriating to compare. Sunwin said with a smile, "My lord, you alone are equivalent to 100 people. If anyone is envious, it's them who are envious of us." Jiang Pengji asked him in return, "Does that mean Zaidao allowed me to fight?" Sunwin was speechless. "No, he did not say that. Don't accuse me wrongly." While they were talking, General Nye had already tricked Qin Gong. He noticed that Qin Gong was making some unnatural movements because of his right eye. This small movement could not be noticed if one was not careful, but he noticed it and used it to attack the right side of Qin Gong's face. It was a feint. Qin Gong subconsciously thought of the stray arrow in the Valley of the Three Mountains. When he dodged, it was slightly to the side. He did not notice that the enemy had taken out 2 metal balls from his waist. He saw the enemy's fingers flip, and the 2 metal balls flew out. They happened to be out of Qin Gong's sight. Jiang Pengji did not wait for Sun Wen to deny it. She gave an order, and White rushed out excitedly. She unsheathed her long sword and forced the enemy to retreat. She reached out with her left arm and caught Qin Gong, who had almost fallen off his horse. "I'll fight. You go down." Jiang Pengji was dressed in men's clothing. Her face was painted with a darker color of makeup. She looked like a slightly thin and weak youth. Qin Gong steadied himself. Just as he was about to say something, his lord rushed toward the enemy. So thin and small? Did Lu Shi run out of military rations? A general should have broad shoulders, strong muscles, and one arm should be the size of a man's thigh. Jiang Pengji was as thin as a woman. Looking at her pitiful appearance, he suspected that she had been dragged over to take the blame without eating breakfast. Get someone else to do it. It's either old or young. Why is Lu Shi's camp filled with a motley crew? Jiang Pengji's face darkened. Behind her, the 5 million salted fish who were cheering for her felt sympathy for the unknown general. "I know the Nye family is rich, but you said that I'm poor. I'm not willing." Was she poor? Since she robbed Tao's family clean, she didn't know that she was poor. The enemy sneered, but he could not laugh anymore. Jiang Pengji looked like a thin scholar, but she was shockingly strong. The horse under the enemy's crotch let out a neigh, unable to bear the burden. Not only that, but White also bullied the horse. Relying on its huge size, it knocked the enemy's horse until it could not stand steadily. Seeing the situation, the enemy knew that he could not gain the upper hand, so he tried to trick Jiang Pengji. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pengji did not chase after him. When she saw the enemy turn to escape, she took the horse noose and wrapped it around his neck. She forcefully pulled him off the horse. "Do you think I'm stupid? White, trample him to death." Chapter 1497. Wu Hinyu. Familiar formula, familiar taste, familiar violence from the familiar streamer. Shui Di. White is a streamer among horses. He's just as violent. He crushed a person's skull with his hoof. Bai Mo Chu Chu. I only have one question. Why did the streamer just praise the Nief family for being wealthy and the people of Zhongzhou? Why did she suddenly kill someone in the next second? Shouldn't the normal scenario be to defeat them and leave an indelible psychological trauma in their hearts? Then one day, she can get rid of the Nief family and smoothly pick up other families? If the streamer kills someone now, won't there be one less overtime team in the future? Fu Rong Gugu. You guys don't understand. The Nief family is a legitimate wealthy family. The streamer doesn't feel bad about the death of a few generals. Anyway, there are a series of little white rabbits waiting for her to conquer. If she doesn't kill all those she doesn't like, how will she recruit those she likes in the future? After so many years, the salted fish are used to all kinds of violent and bloody scenes. They can even survive the most disgusting burning of 1,000 corpses. What's the big deal about a pair of hooves crushing someone's skull? What kind of broken limbs and remains haven't been seen in a chaotic battle between two armies? Jiang Pengji flicked her wrist and flung the miserable corpse of the enemy general more than 10 feet away. She calmly rode on the back of the horse. You've gone too far. Two of the Nye army's generals were killed. While their morale plummeted, some people were so angry that they disregarded the obstruction and ran out on horseback. Jiang Pengji laughed. Are you here to die too? Don't. It wasn't easy for your parents to raise a good-for-nothing like you. Look at you. You have a family and a wife and concubines. If you die in my hands, I'll indirectly kill many people. She didn't curse like Bai Ning, but she was very sarcastic. The enemy general was already very angry. At that moment, his veins were bulging. Die! She only heard the other party shout loudly, carrying a pair of heavy-looking double broad-axes and rushing towards her. The enemy general looked like a power-type player who specialized in strength. Jiang Pengji knew the enemy's strength was almost double that of the good-for-nothing she had just fought. If this kind of brute force was used by an ordinary person, it would be enough to be regarded as an innate god. Jiang Pengji easily withstood the attack, but White was not used to it. It angrily rammed into the enemy horse that had provoked it. Although White had taken a few maternity leave in the past few years and had become the mother of a few cubs, its temper had not improved at all. Instead, it had become even more violent and vicious. Apart from its owner, Jiang Pengji, even its stableman and husband, Little White, who had been taking care of it all year round, would be scolded in the face if it got too close. Yo, your strength is not bad. What a pity. Are your axes made of mud? After Jiang Pengji got her hands on the god-slaying saber, she was no longer interested in other weapons. In her era, the god-slaying saber was a weapon of war at the top of the pyramid. In the current era, it was a true divine weapon. The strength of the clash, just now, was extremely great. Dao's blade had directly caught the other party's axe blades, leaving two clear cuts on the other party's axe blades. When the enemy general heard this, he was extremely angry. When he saw the mark on the axe, only fear remained in his heart. You still have the time to be in a daze on the battlefield? If you don't go to the Yellow Springs Road, who will? The corners of Jiang Pengji's mouth curled up. She had a relaxed attitude. She did not care about the battle at all, because it was impossible for her to lose. If she lost, she would immediately bring the keyboard over and kneel in front of the old chief to prevent herself from making a fool of herself. At the same time, Nie Qing brought Nie Yang to the front to lecture him. However, due to the battlefield, Nie Qing could not be too harsh with his words. Nie Yang also knew that his arrow was too rash, so he did not dare to defend himself. He knew Nie Qing too well. He was soft-hearted and kind. If he remained silent and let Nie Qing say a few words, he would calm down in no time. Nie Yang was about to daydream when he heard the system's voice. He never knew that the system could be nervous and fearful. It was as if it had met a terrifying natural enemy. It's Lu Shi. Nie Yang's lazy eyes showed some surprise. He asked the system in his heart, Lu Shi? What Lu Shi? The system's next words almost broke Nie Yang's expression. The person fighting on the battlefield is Lu Shi, and a knife in his hand. It can't be wrong. This knife. Nie Yang, no matter what, you have to take that knife. Lu Shi cannot be left alive. Nie Yang secretly glanced at Jiang Pengji, who was playing with him. He could not suppress the shock in his heart. Isn't she a feudal lord? Nie Yang had heard of Jiang Pengji's bravery in battle in Zhongzhou, but he had never taken the rumors to heart. The son of a rich family did not sit under the eaves. The son of a rich family did not ride a horse. The sacred lord did not take advantage of danger to be lucky. If even these initiating children knew, how could a feudal lord not know? If he were to fight on the battlefield, he would either die or be injured. If something happened to him, wouldn't his enemies laugh their heads off? Therefore, Nie Yang always thought that the rumors were spread by Jiang Pengji herself to exaggerate her bravery and achievements. This kind of marketing method could be found everywhere in history. In order to show off their talents, some people would boast about their achievements. They had to cheat and brag about their political and military achievements in order to be seen by others. How could an ordinary and mediocre ruler become an eternal emperor? It was enough to have a strong marketing team and a face as thick as the corner of a city wall. One word was boasting. Obviously, Jiang Pengji was not such a fake person. She even told the truth about the number of troops she had deployed to the front lines, let alone other places. Fake. She was disdainful because the speed at which others boasted was slower than her own speed. The system responded to Nie Yang's question. Who knows what kind of person she is? The sword in her hand gives me an ominous feeling. The system had split from the main body a long time ago, so it did not know a lot of information. However, it was well aware of what the god-slaying sword was used for. At that moment, such a sword appeared in the hands of a mortal whom it could not see through. It felt somewhat uneasy. Nie Yang raised his eyebrows. So, this monster was afraid of that sword? He could not help but plot in his heart, but now was not a good time to do so. Brother, there is something I must say. Nie Yang pretended to be pitiful, and Nie Qing's heart softened. Nie Qing asked him, what is it? Nie Yang leaned close to his ear and whispered, the person fighting on the front lines is Lu Shi. What? Nie Qing was so shocked that he almost lost his composure. The commotion attracted the attention of the supervising guards. He could not care about that and hurriedly asked, is it true? Nie Yang said, there is a portrait of a painter in my residence. When I saw the young general just now, I thought he looked familiar. After careful observation, I realized that it was very likely to be Lu Shi. Everyone knows that Lu Shi has a long sword in his hand. The shape is exactly the same as in the portrait. Hearing the commotion, the guards were astonished. They rode their horses to the front of the formation to take a closer look. Chapter 1498. Wei Yong had seen Jiang Pengji before, but that was a few years ago. They had only met briefly a few times. When supervising the battle, Wei Yong's position was some distance away from the front line. He did not realize Jiang Pengji's identity, but Nie Yang did. Since he recognized her, there was no reason to miss the opportunity. Wei Yong gave the general beside him a look. The general understood and immediately rushed out of the battle formation. Jiang Pengji had played enough. She was about to cut off the enemy's head when a gust of wind came from her side. General Lin, I will help you. The salted fishes were in an uproar. How shameless. 2 against 1. Cutie Xiao Meng Exine. Mother of Asterisk 2 against 1. 2 strong men against a weak woman. How shameless are they? The Nia army is so capable. Why don't they send another one to make up a lineup of 3 heroes fighting Lu Bu? Streamer, retreat if you can't handle it. Don't fight them. The salted fishes were in an uproar. They saw the bullet screen and laughed. Cutie Xiao Meng Xin was indeed not aware of how good their streamer was at fighting. The 2 generals attacked from the left and right. They cooperated very well and slowly lured Jiang Pengji to a position close to the Nia army. Jiang Pengji had eaten more salt than they had walked. How could she not realize it? Did they really think she was a boor who had lost her mind because she was addicted to fighting? Not to mention how strong her perception of danger was. She had a spiritual realm. Threats within the realm were useless against her. Old Master Sun, one was worried from beginning to end. He felt that something was wrong when he saw the enemy general try to lure Jiang Pengji to the other side. Qin Gong said, Counselor, shall I support the Lord? Looking at their formation, I'm afraid there is an ambush in the dark. Sun Wen said solemnly, I'm afraid the Lord's identity has been exposed. Qin Gong heard this. If the Lord was killed by the enemy's arrows in front of the battle formation, they could commit suicide to apologize. I'll go now. Qin Gong pulled the reins tightly and was about to urge the horse out of the battle formation when the situation changed again. Jiang Pengji's strength was not inferior to the 2 of them, which shocked the 2 generals. What made them even more frightened was that Jiang Pengji actually chuckled in a voice that only the 3 of them could hear. Do you really think that I don't know how many bastards are hiding in the dark and shooting arrows? You know, knowing this, he still followed the 2 of them into the trap. How arrogant was this person? Jiang Pengji yelled. Mere mortals want to fight against destiny. You overestimate yourself. When the idle people heard what Jiang Pengji said, the bullet screen was in an uproar. Guikai, Guofengxiu. Everyone get out of the way. The streamer is ready to show off. The bullet screen was like a command. Hundreds of arrows flew out from the Nia army's formation. Their target was only Jiangpengji. When Sun Wan, Qin Gong, Bai Ning, and the others saw this scene, they felt like their guts were about to explode. Only Jiangpengji stood on her horse and sneered. Master, no matter how fast Qin Gong was, he couldn't make it in time. In a moment of desperation, he shouted out her identity. In the blink of an eye, the rain of arrows had fallen. Jiangpengji calmly beheaded 2 of the enemy's generals. A visible ripple spread out with her as the center. In the next second, a miraculous scene appeared, causing Qin Gong to swallow the words he was about to say. The ripples in the water had a touch of gold, and the momentum of the hundreds of arrows was greatly reduced. They stopped 5 feet away from Jiangpengji. Did time stop? Jiangpengji sneered and glanced in a certain direction of the enemy. Nieyang felt cold from her stare. He didn't know why, but he had a hunch that Jiangpengji was looking at him. System, is she human? The arrogant system was terrified. It was as quiet as a chicken. Nieyang suspected that Jiangpengji was looking at him, but the system knew very well that the person she was looking at was not Nieyang, but itself. White carried Jiangpengji back gracefully and calmly. The enemy was so frightened by the scene that they didn't dare to shoot a second wave of arrows. When Jiangpengji was far away, the arrows that were frozen in the air rustled and fell to the ground like fallen leaves. Kill! She unsheathed her sword. Only then did everyone wake up from the scene. Old Man Sun Wan couldn't help but touch his chest. He almost forgot to breathe. Hearing Jiangpengji's order, Bai Ning and the other generals immediately led their troops to kill the enemy. The battlefield was filled with battle cries. Zaidao, you don't look too good. Jiangpengji, the main culprit, didn't have any self-awareness. She even had the cheek to ask Sun Wan in return. Sun Wan's fingers trembled as he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He hadn't completely come back to his senses. It's okay. I'll be fine after a while. I'll be fine after a while. The moment the enemy released the arrows, Sun Wan almost thought that Jiangpengji would die in front of the formation. He couldn't think of any other reason for the miraculous scene just now, other than the heaven's decree. Sun Wan was so sure, not to mention the enemy's camp. Jiangpengji calmly returned to her camp under the rain of arrows. The enemy soldiers who witnessed everything lost their will to fight. On the other hand, the soldiers at the rear couldn't see it clearly. Their morale was low, but it wasn't to the point where they had lost their will to fight. Qin Gong and the others led their troops to attack. They didn't encounter any decent resistance. The enemy's line of defense was as fragile as paper. After 2 hours of fierce fighting, the Nia army fled back to the camp with their defeated soldiers. Jiangpengji's side also sounded the gong to retreat. They returned victorious. My lord, just now, Sun Wan's mind kept replaying the scene where the arrows stopped. The more he thought about it, the more scared he became. Jiangpengji turned her head in confusion. What just now? Qin Gong, on the other hand, was straightforward. He went straight to the point. The enemy released hundreds of arrows, but my lord was unharmed. Is there really a god protecting you? After Jiangpengji transmigrated, she rarely used her spiritual power in actual combat. The few times she used it was to investigate the enemy's situation. This time, she made an exception to confirm the rumor that she was the child of destiny. She wanted to completely destroy the Nia army's psychological defense. She admitted that she was very stingy. She still remembered the fire at Zhanjiang Pass. If she didn't pay them back, they would really think that she was made of mud. God, there's no such thing. This is just my own ability. Jiangpengji's thoughts raced. She suddenly thought of something. A comprehensive explanation appeared in her mind. She said, when I was young, I had a dream. I dreamed that the scorching sun descended from the west. The land was barren and starving people were everywhere. Just as I was feeling afraid, an old man in white with white hair and a beard walked out from the sunset. He gave me a set of bamboo slips. He told me that the bamboo slips recorded a set of body training techniques that were specially created for women. He also said that women are born weak because they lack 30% yang energy when they're created. They can make up for this deficiency by practicing this technique later in life. When practiced to perfection, they can even release their inner energy to protect themselves. Sunwin was silent for a long time. He seemed to be thinking about the truth of his lord's words. Jiang Pengji extended her hand to him and smiled. "Try it." Sunwin raised his hand and put it down. Halfway through, he felt that he had hit a barrier and could not move an inch. He didn't believe it. He increased his strength, but it still did not move. Instead, he saw a layer of pale golden ripples. Jiang Pengji said, "Do you believe me now?" The underlying meaning was, Chapter 1499. Sunwin retracted his hand and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. The golden crow's descent from the east is already against common sense. My lord also dreamed of 1,000 miles of desolation and starving people everywhere. Perhaps it was a sign that chaos was coming. In a desperate situation, a deity came out and gave her a book which happened to cater to this slim chance of survival. Jiang Pengji listened to Sunwin cover up her lie with a straight face. She was very satisfied. It was worth it for her to pretend to be pretentious today. However, Bai Ning reacted quickly. He said, "I heard that the training technique practiced by the female troops was also passed down by my lord. Could it be?" Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "Indeed, I improved it according to the book given by the deity because I found that only I can practice the original version. If ordinary women practice it, not only will there be no benefits, but there will also be the danger of exploding and dying. I made some slight changes, and the effect seems to be not bad." Bai Ning and the others were convinced. It was not only because the person who said this was Jiang Pengji, but also because the soldiers of the female battalion were solid evidence. The size of the female battalion was not considered large, but their physical fitness was indeed similar to that of the young and strong men. Some outstanding ones could even surpass them. In addition, their training technique also had a set of coherent combat techniques. If ordinary men did not practice martial arts, 2 or 3 of them might not be able to take down a female soldier. Bai Ning was surprised. It turned out that they were making up for the 30% of yang energy that they were born with. The salted fish listened to Jiang Pengji, deceiving them with a straight face, and secretly gave her a thumbs up. What was the highest realm of lying? Naturally, it was to squeeze countless lies together and turn them into the truth that others could not refute. Tudu Feiqiu. Looking at the streamer lying with a straight face, I really believe her. Bian Huayu. The streamer is not completely lying. At least that set of training technique is really useful. There was a trending topic a few days ago. It said that a martial arts club that was about to close down was selling dog meat. They claimed to teach martial arts, but in the end, they taught the streamer's training technique. The male students also improved, but they did not improve as rapidly as the female students. There was a female student who brutally beat up 4 or 5 groups of perverts on the street. At the mention of this trending topic, all the salted fishes recalled it. The incident started when the female student was on a public bus and encountered 4 or 5 perverts who had nothing better to do than to grope her buttocks and try to take off her underwear under her short skirt. In a fit of rage, she violently beat them up, and the people on the bus could not stop her. The perverts even knelt down and begged for their lives. If someone had not called the police in time, and the police officers had not saved their lives, they would have been sent to the ICU by the hot-tempered female student. In the end, they found out that the female student was underage and had been practicing martial arts for 5 years. She usually only sparred with the students of the dojo, so she didn't hold back. As soon as the report came out, the dojo became an internet sensation. There was an endless stream of parents signing up, and the news of the dojo master being sold could no longer be covered up. The dojo master was completely exposed by the netizens. Thinking about the trending topic and listening to Jiang Pengji's words, the female salted fish were eager to have a go, while the male salted fish were trembling. Shamate Li Si. Baby QAQ, I don't want to marry a weaker version of a streamer at all. Is there a way to survive domestic violence? Deng Hai Quang Ma. Is it too late for me to apologize to my wife with a washboard? To tell you the truth, my wife has been a fan of the streamer ever since she started streaming. She's secretly learning the technique of physical training. I feel so flustered. No wonder she used to act coquettishly to me when I just poured out a bottle of mineral water. Yesterday, when the elevator broke down, she actually carried a gas tank and climbed 5 floors in one go. Tudu Faccio, you're done for. You can't afford to provoke her. Stop struggling. Don't provoke your wife in the future. Domestic violence will take your life. Lula Wadding. It's time to set up a women and men protection organization to protect the poor male comrades who are subjected to domestic violence. The salted fish chatted happily, but it was Jiang Pengji who remembered their jokes. She had lied earlier that women lacked 30% of yang energy when they were conceived and needed to practice to make up for it. It was just to lay a foundation for the future. To improve the status of women, it was far from enough to just have women in power. After all, there were too few women who could climb to a position of power, and they themselves had physiological burdens. In the current agricultural society, it was impossible to close the gap between women and men in terms of production, so improving the status of women was just empty talk. If technology was developed enough to change the mode of social production and free manpower from the fields, people would naturally have the energy to care about human rights. If they could not even provide food and clothing, how could they talk about equal human rights and equality between men and women? Or they could strengthen the competitiveness of labor and production. Jiang Pengji planned to focus on the latter, while developing technology to promote the former. To her, human resources did not distinguish between men and women. Wasting human resources was a shameful act. She lied and covered the technique of physical training with a layer of mythical color. It would be much easier to promote it to the people in the future. For women, practicing it was not only to make up for the physiological gap between them and men, but also to help with childbirth and reduce the probability of dystocia. The medical technology of this era was too backward. Women married early, and their first childbirth was generally concentrated at 16 or 17 years old. Their bodies were not fully developed, so the probability of dystocia and miscarriage was extremely high. Once a pregnant woman gave birth, she would have 1 foot in the gates of hell. If the technique of physical training could reduce the difficulty and pain of childbirth and reduce the risk of death, wouldn't it be a good thing? Jiang Pengji returned victorious. The way the soldiers looked at her was not like they were looking at a person, but more like they were worshiping a god. The heavy rain when Ye Liang set fire to Zhangjiang Pass and the arrows that stopped in midair today all indicated that Jiang Pengji was the destined son of heaven. Don't be fooled by the fact that they always said, men do not speak of supernatural forces and gods. If a supernatural event really happened, they would believe it faster than anyone else. After her triumphant return, Qiguan Rang handed Jiang Pengji a secret letter. Where did it come from? Looking at the signature, Jiang Pengji asked again, how's the battle over at Jingtu's side? Is it still in a stalemate? Because of the inconvenience of communication, the letter in Jiang Pengji's hands was actually old news from more than a month ago. The mountain spirit descended and bestowed the divine art of shipbuilding. Qiguan Rang's eyes were smiling as he said, it seems that my lord is really the person destined by the heavens. What else could it be if he wasn't the chosen son of heaven? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, spread this out. It's best if everyone knows about it, and angers Nye Liang to death. Today's miracle and the defeat of the Nye army were enough to make Nye Liang suffer. Jiang Pengji was about to leave when she saw that Qiguan Rang was hesitant to speak. She asked, Wenzheng, is there anything else? There is indeed one thing, Qiguan Rang said. Since my lord is the son of heaven, you naturally know about the gods. Jiang Pengji saw that Qiguan Rang lied with a straight face and secretly laughed. Others did not know if it was true or false and were fooled by her, but she had told Qiguan Rang about his background. There was no reason for him to be so superstitious. She thought so in her heart, but said, it's true. A trace of malice flashed in Qiguan Rang's eyes. Every word seemed to be coated with poison. If that's the case, Why don't my lord reveal some of the will of heaven and announce to the world that Niel Yang's lifespan is approaching? Jiang Pengji was speechless. Wenjing, you're really showing off more and more. Chapter 1500. Qiguan Rang saw that Jiang Pengji did not speak. He thought that she felt that it was inappropriate and was about to persuade her. Jiang Pengji held back her laughter and said, "No, Wenjing, you misunderstood. In fact, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. This is what we should do. When dealing with enemies, one could never be too ruthless." Seeing the two of them putting their arms around each other's shoulders and smiling at each other, the same thought appeared in the minds of the surrounding salted fishes. Tudu Feichio, colluding with each other. That's perfect. Buckle Jiao Jiao Chi fan. Let's go, let's go. When this pathetic duo is put together, their evil hearts are so scary. Obsessive-compulsive disorder patient. Every time I see Wenjing and the host doing bad things together, I wonder why the host didn't like Wenjing before. Although C.I. Marin was very good, she always felt that C.I. Marin was much gentler and kinder than Wenjing. It was not compatible with the host's aura. Stockholm, I think you seem to have some misunderstanding about Beauty C.I. She looks gentle and kind. Isn't her heart wider than Master Wenjing's? You haven't seen it with your own eyes when Beauty C.I. becomes evil. Anyway, I have gracefully offered my knees to you for a year. Besides, when Big Boss Wenjing met the host, he was already engaged. They were purely friends, so it was impossible for them to call each other. Black Cat's Night. It's fine as long as the CP fans keep themselves cute. The host and Big Boss Wenjing seem to have a lot of CP fans. Just entertain yourselves. Don't involve real people. After all, the relationship between the host and Big Boss Wenjing was pure friendship. It was disgusting to forcefully interpret it as love. Even though he was a salted fish, he didn't have a lot of pure KY love brains. He knew his limits. Of course, most of the hardcore fans who liked KY were young. How could their hand speed and internet speed compare to old salted fish who had been single for a long time? How could they imagine the price of a house in a live broadcast room? Always wicked people want to harm Jean. Speaking of which, if it weren't for Simiai's sacrifice, the streamer would really be single for the rest of her life. The salted fish didn't believe in pure friendship between men and women until they met Jiang Pengji. As a very outstanding woman, there were many men around her, but only the lame Wei Ci took a fancy to her. The others were either single or married with children. Salted fish, who had nothing better to do, had even carefully researched this topic, making it a hot topic. In the end, an excellent answer was liked and pushed to the top. Egami sauce. First, no one will fall in love with a boss who squeezes them dry all day long. Secondly, this only proved that they were all straight men. Being in a relationship with a streamer is like coming out of the closet. You guys are touching 1090's breasts and talking. Does she look like a girl? The salted fishes chattered incessantly. Jiang Pengji laughed at herself. Wenjing, don't you think we're in cahoots? Qiguan Rang glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. His gaze was clear as day. Who would insult themselves like that? This is called like-minded. Qiguan Rang retorted with a straight face. Jiang Pengji was speechless. The little princess was right. If they were like-minded, then so be it. She had no objections. Jiang Pengji decided to reward the three armies after the great victory in the day. They celebrated for the whole night, and the bonfire burned throughout the night. In contrast, the atmosphere in Nying was not as relaxed. The entire army was enveloped in a suffocating and oppressive atmosphere. Bad news came one after another, and the morale of the army was completely shaken. 3 valiant generals had died in the battle. Hundreds of arrows stopped in midair. Lushi was unscathed. The morale of the army had collapsed. The number of casualties and captives reached 40,000. Niel Yang was also shocked to the point of vomiting blood. Perhaps he had gotten used to it, but he did not faint this time. However, his appearance made everyone worried. To put it in a depressing way, their lord, Niel Yang, looked like he was about to die. Get up. This isn't your fault. Blame the enemy for being difficult to deal with. Nielyong did not blame his son, Nieqing. Even if he was the one fighting, the situation would probably be the same. According to the scene described by the crowd, their enemy had the support of a deity. Hundreds of arrows could turn a person into a hedgehog. However, all the arrows strangely stopped in midair 5 feet in front of Jiang Pengji. Circles and circles of pale golden ripples were like a heavy shield, blocking all the harm outside. The arrows could not advance an inch. The 3 armies could only watch as she rode away calmly. The strategist sighed. Has anyone seen such a scene since ancient times? Throughout history, when had such a scene appeared? No, perhaps there had been. Nielyong could not help but think of Beichun from hundreds of years ago. Beichun was the dynasty before the chaos of the 16 kingdoms. This dynasty had unified the Central Plains for 367 years. For many scholars, Beichun was the Orthodox dynasty. This could be seen from Chengjing. Huangsong's ancestor was a descendant of the royal concubine of the Xia dynasty. The royal family of the Xia dynasty was also a descendant of the royal family of Beichun. With this identity, Huangsong could be assisted by Chengjing. Although Huangsong did not know that he had such a powerful background, Chengjing knew. Speaking of Beichun, it was also a dynasty full of legends. The founder of Beichun was born in a small family of farmers. When he was born, a golden dragon was born. Coincidentally, the world was in chaos. His father and brothers died of exhaustion in the Battle of Chinka. Coincidentally, the founder of Beichun led his troops to revolt. At that time, there was a powerful feudal lord who was about to conquer the world. The world thought that this overconfident peasant boy would kneel, who knew that a few days before the decisive battle, there would be a sudden rainstorm. The dam collapsed, and countless lives were drowned on both sides. The enemy's feudal lords suffered because they had set up camp on low ground. Their rations and supplies were all wet and moldy. This was not the worst. On the eve of the decisive battle, there were tens of millions of meteors, long or short, big or small. They accurately hit the camp, causing countless deaths and injuries. It was a godlike operation. Because of this, the royal family of Beichun became known as the descendants of the gods. It lasted for 367 years. There were several coincidental miracles that extended the life of the royal family of Beichun every time. In the last years of Beichun, the royal family courted disaster again. They caused chaos in the world, and the people were plunged into misery and suffering. They could not bear it anymore. There was no need to bear it anymore. Various forces revolted, and the royal family of Beichun was destroyed. However, the feudal lords who destroyed the royal family of Beichun died miserably. Their entire families, young and old, men and women, did not have a good ending. The common people said that the royal family of Beichun was indeed the descendants of the gods. The world should be theirs. Which of the feudal lords who stole their world had a good ending? In the end, the 16 countries were in chaos for so many years. In the end, did the descendants of the royal family of Beichun stand out? Now, the mythical color of Jiang Pengji seemed to have the shadow of Beichun. This made people's hearts beat fast. Could it be that the ancestors of the Liu family of Hejian have the blood of the descendants of Beichun? Someone thought of this history like Nielyong and spoke to break the heavy atmosphere. Wei Yong's expression became stern. He scolded, "Nonsense. Are you trying to shake the morale of the army?" Chapter 1501. Wei Yong sneered. If the Beichun imperial family was so blessed by the heavens, how could they have died without a burial? When Beichun had been destroyed, the imperial tombs of a dozen emperors had been dug up and smashed by the angry people. The corpses in the coffins had been dragged out and whipped. All kinds of funerary objects had been robbed. Other than Huangsong's branch that had escaped, none of the other descendants of the Beichun imperial family had a good ending. Was this divine favor? The talk of gods and ghosts was just something those stupid people had made up to scare him. Wei Yong tried to convince himself. He also tried to use these words to convince others. Nielyong was silent for a long time. He smiled disdainfully and said coldly, "No matter what kind of Yao art Lu she used to put on this show, she has achieved her goal. The Nya army had almost lost their will to fight. The soldiers only knew to turn and flee. People squeezed and stepped on each other. It was a mess without order. This resulted in only a few of the enemy's casualties. They had lost 40,000. 40,000 casualties and almost no resistance at all. They were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The enemy only had to repeat the action of swinging their swords. Thinking of this, Niel Yang's already pale face became even more deathly still. Report. At this time, the messenger's voice broke the silence in the tent. Wei Yong did not dare to let Niel Yang read the battle report directly in case it was bad news and angered Niel Yang. Read it and then tell me. Niel Yang understood his gaze and gave a weak smile. Rather than saying he trusted Wei Yong, it was more to comfort him. Because of his broken body, Wei Ling was already frightened by the mere twang of a bow. Wei Yong took the secret report and read it closely. Everyone secretly looked at his expression and guessed if it was good news or bad news. Seeing Wei Yong's brow furrowed and his knuckles white from the force, they knew it was bad news. It was definitely bad news. Niel Yang sighed and reached out to indicate for Wei Yong to give him the secret report. Whether it was good news or bad news, he had to know. Master. Wei Yong resisted for the first time and overstepped his bounds. This news, he stopped speaking. Niel Yang did not force him and said, "If you won't let me see it, then you will relay it. Is there worse news?" Wei Ling took a deep breath, her eyes slightly red. Lu Shi sent General Fu Wang to attack Yang Tao. Not long after, someone called himself Shan Gui and offered him the art of shipbuilding. They were already under great pressure, and the entire army was in a state of panic. They did not dare to go against the child of destiny that was appointed by the heavens. Now, there was the appearance of the mountain ghost descending to the world to bestow the divine art of shipbuilding. For Niel Yang and the others, it was undoubtedly one disaster after another. However, this was not the end. Niel Yang tightened his grip on the mat, trying to suppress the rising pain in his chest. The veins on his forehead bulged. After a while, everyone noticed that his eyes were wide open, as if his eyeballs were about to pop out of their frames. It was extremely frightening. What else? That's not the only thing, right? What else is there? Just say it. Don't tell me that I'll be angered to death by her. Niel Yang knew his best friend very well. If it was just such a piece of bad news, why was his eyes turned red? Lord, Wei Ling's lips moved for a while, as if hesitating whether to say it or not. In the end, he still said it. He almost choked with sobs as he said, "The secret report said, God entered your dreams and told Lu Shi that Lord's lifespan is not enough to be calculated and is not a concern. A person's lifespan was 12 years in an era and 100 days in an era." Niel Yang's eyes widened like a goldfish that was suffocating. His chest rose and fell rapidly, and he vomited a mouthful of red and black blood. Everyone was so frightened that they did not dare to make a sound. Wei Ling and Nie Qing hurriedly went forward to support him, but they did not expect the two to be waved away by Niel Yang. Niel Yang's strength was so great that he did not seem to be seriously ill. However, many people were worried that this was the final radiance of the setting sun. Waving the two away, Niel Yang suddenly raised his head and laughed. He raised his hand to the top of the tent and scolded in a hoarse voice, "What damned heavens! If fate has decided, it will take away my lifespan now. Man can conquer nature. So what if it's Lu Shi? So what if it's her?" Niel Yang stood up shakily. There was a faint hint of insanity between his brows, which made people's hair stand on end. Wei Ling looked at his good friend, and his heart ached uncontrollably. He still remembered the scene when he first met his good friend. He was incomparably elegant and elegant. He wore a black scholar's robe with a thin coat over it. He wore a lacquered gauze crown on his head. His slightly thin lips carried an amiable smile, but there was a faint sense of alienation. He was the standard son of an aristocratic family. Now, how did he become this haggard and demeanor of insanity? As he pondered, he heard Nie Qing's loud shout. It sounded like a cuckoo crying blood. His heart tightened when he heard it. Lifting his head, Wei Ling saw Nye Qing rush forward like an arrow and raise his hand to catch Nye Yang, who had fallen backward with a deathly still face. Wei Ling opened his eyes without blinking. The noises around him gradually faded away. The voices of Lord seemed to be a vague voice from another world. Nye Qing cried out for his father, and a group of colleagues knelt on the ground and cried blood. What happened? How could it be? Wei Ling's knees gave way, and he collapsed to the ground. The night passed. The scouts that Jiang Pengji sent out discovered that the Nye camp was draped in white mourning. Everyone looked mournful and hurriedly sent the news back. Jiang Pengji was having breakfast. Her breakfast that day was a total of 15 meat buns mixed with mincemeat. Each bun was the size of a strong man's fist. An ordinary man would be almost full after eating 3 buns. Jiang Pengji ate 15 in a row and drank 3 bowls of seaweed soup with shrimp skin. Jiang Pengji burped inelegantly and patted her flat stomach. She picked up a handkerchief and wiped her mouth. Tell me, what's the latest news? Jiang Pengji hated military intelligence before and after eating. It was fine if there was good news, but bad news would ruin her appetite. The soldier said, last night at midnight, Nye Yang died of illness. Everyone in the Nye camp was mourning. The whole army draped in white mourning and hung up white banners overnight. Jiang Pengji was stunned when she heard the news. No, is Nye Guangshan that weak? Brother, you're really fast. You're rushing to finish the filming. The live stream room was in an uproar. Jiang Pengji hurriedly pushed the food table aside and hurriedly gathered everyone for a discussion. Everyone looked at each other. Even though they had been looking forward to Nye Yang receiving his bento all day and night, when he really did, it felt like a dream. This brother died just like that? Feng Yi and Sun Lan, who were sitting in the corner and listening, muttered to themselves. It was fine if he died, but he died of anger. This was great. Their lord's image of seeking revenge for the smallest grievance had been completely recorded in history. Thinking of the lord's words and actions that were recorded a while ago, Feng Yi felt that her lord would be slandered by the future generations. Wei Si asked, did the Nye camp really hang up white banners and the whole army draped in white mourning? Jiang Pengji said, Zi Xiao, are you suspecting that it's a trap? Wei Si was not sure. Nye Yang was very treacherous, but his body could not withstand a series of blows. Thus, Wei Si said, it's not that I'm suspecting it. It's just that Nye Yang died of illness. We have to send people to offer our condolences. Jiang Pengji, Zi Xiao, are you serious? Chapter 1502. Although I don't want to admit it, Nye Yang's death seems to have something to do with me. If we send someone to offer our condolences now, I'm afraid that they won't appreciate it. They'll probably think that we're going there to show off our strength. Jiang Pengji felt that whoever she sent would be courting death. Envoys are not to be executed during a battle. Bullish *T, this kind of conventional rule could be broken at any time. Which fool would stick to it? Not only did Jiang Pengji and the civil and military officials feel excited, but the salted fish were so shocked that they forgot to eat breakfast. A small group of cute and good-looking people cried until they were out of breath. Topics such as Nye Yang's death and Nye Yang was angered to death by the streamer were also trending. Hearing Jiang Pengji's opening words, many of the salted fish sneered. Long-lasting tea. What do you mean by a little bit of relationship? From the looks of it, the host had no idea what was going on. Tudu Feichio, you can't say that. If I remember correctly, Nye Yang is not in good health. Didn't Beauty CI reveal that Nye Yang had been poisoned in the past? It seemed that it was done by someone from within the Nye family. Nye Yang refused to rest quietly, and the remaining poison greatly reduced his lifespan. Later, it was said that Nye Yang's lifespan was less than half a year. Now that he was dead, the host could only be regarded as a catalyst and not the main cause. The person who really killed Nye Yang was the original murderer who poisoned him. Jiang Pengji was at most an accomplice. Always wicked people want to harm Zhun Sai. He's a Duke of Zhongzhou after all. It's really sad that he's kneeling just like that. Unreal City. Come on, there are plenty of people who have died in the hands of the streamer. So what if they are feudal lords? Some salted fish lamented that Niel Yang's death was a pity. Some salted fish celebrated that Jiang Pengji was one step closer to unifying the world, and some salted fish expressed concern and condolences. No matter what the cause of Niel Yang's death was, outsiders would think that he died because he was angered by Jiang Pengji. Sending people to offer their condolences was equivalent to sending people to their graves. Jiang Pengji knew this too. How could she send someone to offer her condolences? She never expected that Wei Ci would disagree with her at this time. Out of respect for her opponent, she still had to send someone to offer her condolences. Jiang Pengji said, "I've killed at least 8,000 people, if not 10,000. Do I have to pay my respects to all of them?" In any case, she wouldn't agree. Regardless of their strength, in terms of status, Niel Yang and Jiang Pengji were of the same level. If she really wanted to send someone to offer her condolences, the status of the messenger could not be low. She was not willing to choose anyone. Wei Ci volunteered himself. Jiang Pengji was so angry that she glared at him several times. No matter what Wei Ci said, she refused to agree. "Lord, condolences are one thing, but confirming that Niel Yang really died of illness is another. What if he really faked his death?" Jiang Pengji said, "Then let's wait for 3 to 5 months. Anyway, his body has long been ruined. Sooner or later, he will meet the king of hell." Wei Ci could only sigh. Jiang Pengji was stubborn, and so was he. No one was willing to take a step back when it came to issues that concerned the overall situation. In the end, Jiang Pengji was so angry that she flicked her sleeves and left. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Qiguan Rang said quietly, "You're really bold. The Lord obviously wants to protect you from taking risks, but you don't appreciate it." Wei Ci smiled bitterly and said, "How can I not know the Lord's intentions? It's just that Niel Yang died of illness. Whether it's true or not, if the Lord doesn't express her stance, I'm afraid you'll be criticized. This is not good for the Lord's reputation." The time when Niel Yang died of illness was when the morale of the Nie army was in chaos. No matter what, they didn't dare to kill the messenger when there was no leader. We can't sacrifice the lives of more than 200,000 troops just because of a moment of impulsiveness. His lord had a violent temper. If something really happened to the messenger, she would definitely send troops. Qiguan Rang glanced at him and sneered. "I see. You've thought it through. No wonder you're so fearless." It was precisely because he saw through the trick that he had the confidence to volunteer for the mission. Wei Ci continued, "There's another point. Xi's elder brother, Wei Dan, is Niel Yang's confidant." Qiguan Rang said coldly, "If I were your elder brother, I would definitely make sure that you wouldn't be able to return. Otherwise, you'll become a scourge by releasing a tiger back into the mountains." Wei Ci smiled and said, "My elder brother's temperament is different from Wenjing's. He's good at everything. His only weakness is that he values friendship too much. If it wasn't for this, Wei Dan wouldn't have tried his best to protect the legitimate son of Niel Yang in his previous life. The situation in his previous life was very different from now. Niel Yang of the Nie family had died of illness a few years ago. His only son, Nie Qing, became a thorn in the eyes of the elders. The legitimate son of the third branch of the Nie family, Nie Yang, took advantage of the chaos to rise and secretly gain the trust of Old Master Nie. Old Master Nie was also a weirdo. He was old but young at heart. His greed for power and desire to control his descendants made people's hair stand on end. He was old and lacked the energy to deal with affairs. In order to ensure absolute authority, Old Master Nie promoted Nie Yang, who coincidentally came into his line of sight. Because Nie Yang was young, innocent, not loved by his parents, and his mother's family was weak, who would have thought that these were all Nie Yang's disguises? Nie Yang used Old Master Nie to snatch the position of the Nie family master. He secretly harmed his disloyal fellow clansmen and sent Old Master Nie to heaven. Nie clan became Nie Yang's word, and Nie Qing's situation improved. After all, everyone was afraid of Nie Qing's father, Nie Liang. Nie Liang died of illness. Nie Qing's talent was not as good as his father's. There was nothing to fear. Raising him was just another pair of chopsticks. In order to fulfill his best friend's wish and protect Nie Qing, his brother Wei Qiong married his eldest daughter to him. Wei Qiong himself died of depression. When his brother died of illness, he was not even 50 years old. It was because he valued his feelings too much that Wei Qiong could not kill him when Wei Ci went to pay his condolences. Qiguan Rang did not comment, but he would not doubt Wei Ci's judgment of people. If Wei Ci really went to pay his condolences to Nie Liang, it would most likely be daunting but not dangerous. The only obstacle was his lord did not agree. What's the point of saying so much? If the lord doesn't agree, can you go there in private? Wei Ci laughed. The lord will agree. Wenzheng, do you dare bet with me? Qiguan Rang scolded jokingly. When did you learn Feng Zishu and Yang Jing Rong's bad temperament? What's there to bet? I won't bet. Because he knew in his heart that if they really bet, Wei Ci would definitely win. The facts proved that Qiguan Rang's guess was right. The next day, Jiang Pengji agreed to Wei Ci's request with an extremely sullen expression. After all, it was not a matter of principle. Jiang Pengji really could not dissuade Wei Ci. Of course, if it was a matter of principle, Wei Ci could not dissuade her either. I suddenly remembered that when my lord's grandmother died of illness, it was Zi Xiao who went on behalf of my lord. Jiang Pengji squatted on top of the wall and looked at the figures of Wei Ci and his group gradually becoming small dots in the distance. Her face was full of melancholy. She said, "Otherwise, why would I call you my wife? You're so virtuous. What more can I ask for?" Qiguan Rang's expression froze. He looked disgusted. Jiang Pengji said with a face full of vicissitudes, "Wenzheng, do you think Nie Guangshan is really dead?" Qiguan Rang said, "Zi Xiao will go to pay his condolences. Whether Nie Liang is dead or alive, there will be some clues." Jiang Pengji said, "What if he's really dead? Doesn't my lord think that this is a good time to seize the opportunity to annex the Nie family of Zhongzhou? Once Nie Liang is dead, Nie Qing won't be able to shoulder the heavy responsibility. The Nie family is full of hidden dangers. It's a good time to seize the victory and pursue the enemy." Qiguan Rang sneered. "What do you think, my lord?" Jiang Pengji rubbed her chin. "I always feel that it's immoral to scheme for someone's family property the day after their corpse has yet to turn cold." Qiguan Rang was speechless. Chapter 1503. Zi Xiao is too rash. How can the Nie camp still be rational? What if he really doesn't come back? Old Master Sun was very worried about this. The current situation was very bad. Wei Ci running over would be courting death. He understood the logic of Wei Ci's analysis, but how could people worry so much when they were agitated? Not to mention other things, if one or two disobedient and hot-tempered generals wanted to use force, could Wei Ci escape unscathed? If he doesn't come back, more than 200,000 people will be buried with him. Zi Xiao is not at a disadvantage. Qiguan Rang took a sip of tea and said leisurely, "Since ancient times, how many emperors have been buried alive with people, but not even this number. Besides, Zi Xiao is a loach. It's not easy to catch him." Sun choked. He did not expect Qiguan Rang, who had always been single and unsociable, to crack a cold joke. Nie Liang's death is more or less related to the Lord. I'm afraid that going to mourn will be seen as a provocation. Although Old Master Sun hated the Nie family, he felt it was a pity when he thought of Nie Liang's death. Qiguan Rang smiled coldly. It's human nature. Was Wei Ci really going to mourn sincerely? Don't be ridiculous. He mainly wanted to confirm if the person was really dead. He also had the intention of flaunting his strength and suppressing the Nie family. Normal people would not believe that a weasel marrying a chicken for 100 years was an act of kindness from the bottom of his heart. While the two were chatting, Wei Ci and his party arrived 2 miles away from the Nie camp and were stopped halfway. "Who are you?" The scouts of the Nie army looked at Wei Ci and the others with hostility and faintly surrounded them. Wei Si smiled and bowed while riding on the horse. "We are here on the orders of our lord to mourn Duke Guangshan." When the Nya army scouts heard this, their faces turned livid and they wanted to draw their swords to kill. Wei Si smiled faintly, as if he did not see the shining blades. Instead, it was the soldiers who escorted him who came forward to protect him. When two armies fight, envoys are not to be killed. Today, we are here on the orders of our lord to mourn Duke Guangshan, not to fight in front of the battlefield. Is it your idea or someone else's? Duke Guangshan has just passed away, and you are ignoring military discipline? Wei Si was so calm that he managed to subdue a few soldiers of the Nya army. They looked at each other and finally took a step back and sent someone to pass the message. When Nya Ying and the other hot-tempered generals heard this, they exploded in anger. What does Lu Shi mean? You've angered the previous master over and over again, and now you've sent some cheap slave soldiers to pretend to be nice? This general's scolding was not polite at all. The scholars frowned when they heard this. The price of a head was only 1 copper coin. Whether it was a slave or a soldier, both of them were the lowest class in society. Even if they were angry in their hearts, Jiang Pengji had the guts to send someone over. The status of a messenger was definitely not low. It was too hurtful to scold someone as a slave soldier with a high price. Another person gritted his teeth and said, "Just a moment ago, they were playing tricks on us, angering our late lord to the point of dying of illness. Now, they're sending people to offer their condolences and hold a funeral. Clearly, they're taking advantage of our Nya family for granted. Get him a scram. If he dares to take even half a step into the former lord's mourning hall, I'll make him come in on his knees and roll out like a human swine." Some of the generals were even more hot-tempered. They carried weapons that weighed 30 to 40 kilograms and wanted to go out. "Everyone, please wait a moment. I'll go chop off his head and offer it to the former master spirit." Hearing that they were getting angrier as they spoke, Wei Yong, who was dressed in a plain morning dress, berated them with an indifferent expression. "Enough. Isn't it messy enough?" Everyone had indignant expressions on their faces. They were all men of iron and steel. How could they endure the fact that the enemy was taking advantage of them? Wei Yong said, "Take care of the former master's funeral and stabilize the army's morale to prevent Lu Shi from taking the opportunity to make trouble. Only after these are done can the former master pass away with peace of mind. If you touch the messenger, Lu Shi won't care if the former master passes the 7th day of his death. Do you want to see a new scar on the former master's body before it's even cold?" His words were so harsh that the few troublemakers did not dare to make trouble again. However, there were some who were unconvinced. If Lu Shi dares to send his troops, this general will dare to meet them head-on. The former master died unjustly. Do you still want to be humiliated by them after his death? The general straightened his neck and asked angrily, "Is the military advisor afraid of death? You know that the traitors have ill intentions, yet you still want to protect them? This isn't about being afraid of death. It's about looking at the bigger picture." Wei Yong had not slept well for 2 to 3 days. His face was abnormally pale, but he still forced himself to say, "You can act like a hero for a while. If the former master's funeral can't be held, then you can lead the troops to fight Lu Shi." The general said mournfully, "Are you going to let them flaunt their strength in front of the former master's coffin?" Wei Yong said, "Not necessarily. If they come, they should offer incense and mourn. They should act like filial sons and grandsons." When the general heard this, he felt a little better. Wei Yong asked the messenger, "Who is the messenger Lu Shi sent?" The messenger replied, "This person's surname is Wei and his name is Ci. He claims to be Lu Shi's advisor." In an instant, everyone realized that Wei Yong's face was twisted. It was an indescribable expression. "Wei Ci? Isn't this Zi Shun's younger brother?" As Niao Yang's right-hand man and close friend, Wei Yong's family connections had been completely uncovered. Many people who were on good or bad terms with him knew that Wei Yong had a third brother who was squatting on Lu Shi's side as an advisor. They had never imagined that the person who came to mourn this time would be Wei Si. This time, someone laughed mockingly. It looks like Lu Shi also knows what he's doing. Another person echoed, that's true. If he didn't know what he was doing, why would he send Wei Si over? Isn't it because he wants elder brother's protection? Wei Yong said coldly, if Wei Si is the slightest bit disrespectful in front of the former master's coffin, he will definitely kill him himself. When these words were said, those who had other thoughts did not dare to say anything else. Before the former master Nielyang died, he had entrusted young master Nieqing to Wei Yong. Wei Yong was the young master's father-in-law and had a strong backing. Fan Shun said to Wei Yong in private, I've made things difficult for you. Your younger brother is also insensible. Wei Yong said, Zixiao has been a sensible child since he was young and has never caused anyone to worry about him. If he dares to come, he most likely has the confidence to escape unscathed. Fan Shun choked for a moment. Who gave him the confidence to pull out his swords? Wei Yong said in a muffled voice, his elder brother. Because he understood his elder brother's character and knew that Wei Yong would consider the bigger picture, Wei Yong was certain that Wei Yong would not dare to let anything happen to him in front of Nielyang's coffin. Fan Shun cast a sympathetic look at Wei Yong. With such a troublesome younger brother, Wei Yong was pitiful enough. Even though the smell of gunpowder was thick in the tent, when Wei Si came over, the atmosphere was considered good. At least the expected scene of someone drawing a sword and rushing up to slash at him did not happen. When everyone saw the sword hanging from Wei Si's waist, their faces immediately fell. This fellow was asking for a beating. As if they could read minds, Wei Si stopped in front of the tent and unsheathed his sword before entering. Wei Si first bowed to Nieqing, then nodded his head in greeting to everyone. He took out the sacrificial items and placed them in front of the coffin. He knelt in front of the coffin and offered sacrifices. His every move was flawless. Si came in a hurry and had not prepared the funeral oration. I could only write it in a hurry. I hope young Lang Jun will forgive me. Chapter 1504. Wei Si said that his funeral oration was written in a hurry, so they did not have any expectations for the content of the funeral oration. Funeral oration used for funerals were mostly articles expressing mourning, remembrance, and mourning for the deceased. The current funeral oration was mainly prose and four-character rhymes, and it was easy to recite. The content was basically to remember the deceased's life experiences, praise the deceased character, and express grief. If there were any mistakes in the funeral oration, there was a high chance that Wei Si would be stabbed to death in front of Nielyang's coffin. The scholar standing in the corner looked at Wei Si's respectful and devout attitude and sneered in his heart. He said in a low voice, he had never met the late master. How could he write a heartfelt funeral oration? It's hilarious. As mentioned earlier, the content of the funeral oration was related to the deceased's life experiences. If Wei Si did not know Nielyang, his writing would not be appropriate. Unbeknownst to him, Wei Si had done some research on Nielyang. After all, his brother Wei Dan from his previous life had written more than 10 funeral oration after Nielyang's death, almost one every year. The year Wei Dan died of illness, he was bedridden with a cold and could not get up to attend the funeral. It was Wei Si who went on his behalf. Wei Si did not know Nielyang well enough, but Wei Dan definitely did. He sorted out many letters for Wei Dan's funeral and found that most of the letters were written to his close friend Nielyang. Some were funeral oration, some were ordinary letters, and some were long-winded chatter. Last night, I dreamed of the past and suddenly realized that it has been 14 years since Guang Shan passed away, and I am 47. Life is already half over, and the pear tree in front of the courtyard has bloomed and withered several times. Day and night, my mind is in a mess. Thinking of the first time I met you, you wore a black robe and a black crown, standing under the courtyard, talking elegantly. Thinking of all the past, now, it is as bright as before, as if it was yesterday. Your laughter and words still ring in my ears. Alas, Guang Shan, the heavens do not give me false years. I die of old age, my heart aches. Libation. I mourn your early death. I also weep blood. Of course, these were all written by Wei Dan to Niel Yang as a friend. Wei Si could not directly copy, or he would reveal flaws. With detailed materials, it was not difficult to write a standard elegiac oration. Other than the crackling of the white candles burning in the tent, there was only the sound of Wei Si's sincere recitation of the funeral rites. As the funeral rites began, everyone's irascible and irrepressible emotions seemed to have found an outlet to vent. Nie Qing even knelt in front of his father's coffin and cried until his face was covered in tears. After Wei Si finished reciting, he gave a long bow. Regardless of whether it was the funeral oration or the etiquette, no one could find fault with it. Even if everyone wanted to make things difficult for him, they had no excuse. Someone secretly wiped his tears and sneered. Was it really written in a hurry and not someone ghost wrote it? What interaction did Wei Si have with Niel Yang? The contents of the funeral oration were all true. This level of understanding was definitely not superficial. They must have been close friends. Someone berated in a low voice. Stop talking. Don't be presumptuous in front of the deceased Lord Spirit. I know you're not happy with Wei Zishuan, but you can't simply accuse him. After Wei Si entered the tent, his every move was under our eyes. Did the two brothers communicate at all? Not only did they not communicate, but Wei Si did not even look at Wei Si once, let alone act as his gunman. Kneeling in front of the spirit, Nie Qing wiped his tears. It took him a while to calm his sorrowful mood. He asked Wei Si in a hoarse voice, "Does your lord have any instructions?" Before Niel Yang passed away due to illness, out of consideration of morality and benevolence, Jiang Pengji could not mobilize troops before the 7th day of his death. Otherwise, she would be nailed to history and be reviled. No matter how great the hatred was according to the tradition of the deceased, no matter how big the matter was, it had to be moved to the end of the funeral. Wei Si said, "My lord instructed me to come here to pay my respects. My every move must be respectful and not the slightest bit negligent or rude." Nie Qing sneered and ignored Wei Si's Tai Chi excuse. "What else?" Wei Si said, "Stop fighting for now. Young Lang Jun, help the spirit back." Nie Qing did not speak, but Wei Si said, "Regarding the matter of helping the spirit, the young lord has his own plans. There's no need for an outsider to help him plan. The Duke of Lanting is willing to send Zixiao to pay his respects. Whether it's sincere or not, he's up to no good. He's taking advantage of the fact that there's no one in the Nie family. After 7 days, let the Duke of Lanting wait. The enmity of the late lord's death can't be let go just like that. Please pass on these words, Zixiao." Wei Si sighed and stood up. He knew that such a situation would happen. In his previous life, Niel Yang died early and his elder brother died of depression. Naturally, the two brothers had no conflicts and had always been respectful. This life was different. Niel Yang walked to the front of the stage and Wei Si assisted from the side. Niel Yang's death had something to do with his lord, so the relationship between the two brothers became tense. However, Wei Si did not regret it. They were still brothers, but they had different standpoints. I will pass on every word to the Lord. Wei Si glanced at Wei Si out of the corner of his eye. His eyes were surging with complicated emotions that outsiders could not understand. Wei Si said in a low voice, "Brother, why do you have to do this?" Niel Yang had just died. The internal strife in the Nie family was fierce. More than 200,000 troops squatted at Zhanjiang Pass and fought to the death. If the power in the rear changed and their rations were cut off, Wei Si and the others would be in a desperate situation. Don't think that the Nie family and the others couldn't do it. What couldn't those people do? Wei Si asked him, "Judge others by yourself. If the person lying in the coffin today was the Duke of Lanting, you would know why." Wei Si was speechless and could only choose to remain silent. "Brother, take care." Before Wei Si left, he glanced at Niel Yang lying in the coffin. After bidding farewell to Nie Qing, he turned and left. Seeing Wei Si leave, everyone held their breath and almost couldn't breathe. Nie Qing said, "Father-in-law, what should we do now?" Wei Si was a step behind and followed beside Nie Qing. He said calmly, "The late lord made thorough arrangements when he was alive. Young lord, don't worry. The obstacles in Nie Qing's path would be swept clean." The days of keeping vigil were tough. The white banners and mourning cloaks fluttered in the wind. The originally unstable morale of the soldiers had been stabilized by Nie Yang's death. Wei Si continued to use his methods. Not only did the soldiers not lose their will to fight, but they were determined to fight to the death because of their grief. Because Nie Qing had lost his father, he had eaten very little for several days. He looked pale and weak, and he had suffered a lot. Nie Yang could only persuade him to eat a little. If he didn't eat, Nie Yang would accompany him silently. Sigh. Looking at Nie Qing's back, which was unsteady on his knees, Nie Yang sighed in his heart. This Nie Yang is really ruthless. He even hid it from his son. In reality, there were only two people who knew that Nie Yang was still alive. One was Wei Si, and the other was Fan Shen. Both of them were old foxes. During the vigil, the two of them cried bitterly, as if their father had died. The system laughed coldly. They wait for people like you who are ambitious and can't hold back. Nie Yang secretly glanced at Wei Si's tent. Does he really not have many days left? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.